You're on. Okay. I would. Mr. Feliz just walked out. So.
Walked in and he walked out.
Yes. So I was just waiting for him to hopefully come back in.
I think we know where he is. You might be able to get the
Ball rolling, yeah.
Yeah, I want to make sure he's going to be here for roll call. There he is. Okay. Are we recording?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. But I want to make sure.
Okay. Make sure you're on.
Okay, great. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 20th, 2025 regular meeting of the Township of Montclair Planning Board. In accordance with the New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building and by sending a copy to the newspaper designated by the township for notices. This meeting is being broadcast live on Channel 34 and is streaming live and will be available on demand on YouTube. This meeting is a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning that the board has powers and procedures resembling a court of law, and we are obligated to objectively determine facts and draw conclusions from them in order to provide the basis of an official action. Any questions or comments must be limited to the issues of what the board may legally consider in reaching a decision, and the decorum appropriate to a judicial hearing must be maintained at all times. The fire exits are to my right, which is your left, and also the back of the room where you entered. And next up is roll call.
Mayor Baskerville.
Present.
Mr. Borshoff is excused. Mr. Campbell is excused. Mr. Graham is excused. Mr. Ianwali.
Here.
Mr. D'Amato.
Here.
Mr. Feliz.
Here.
Miss Willis.
Here.
Mr. Neiman.
Here.
And Chair Brodock.
I'm here. Next up is swearing in of the board professionals.
You know the drill.
Is your mic on, Mr. Neese?
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you may give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have the minutes from October 6th.
I didn't receive any corrections to the October 6 minutes.
I'd like to move that we accept the minutes as is.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay.
Next up is the resolution for 400 Orange Road.
Did
Did I do that one?
you
Did I-
sent
is that what-
you
did I
sent-
send that on Friday?
today, or this?
Friday, I sent it. I sent, that was
Well, you
Mr.
sent-
Massera. I sent, yes,
You
I
sent
sent
that.
that to Mr. Massera and asked him to comment. He didn't do so. And on Friday afternoon, I sent it to the members of the board.
Correct.
And so I still have not heard from Mr. Massera, so.
Okay.
Board. And as I tell all applicants' attorneys,
Sorry. As I tell all applicants' attorneys, we will consider their comments and anything they wish to, say about the resolution, but the ultimate deciding authority, of course, is this board. So I'm satisfied that the resolution I drafted incorporates everything that needed to be incorporated.
Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Um,
Abstention?
I just have to abstain because I missed reading it, so I can't.
Okay,
I didn't.
I wasn't there, so I abstain as well.
right.
That's Ms.
Three of you
Willis.
abstain. Okay,
Yes.
got it.
All right, next up, we have no old business, so the new business, we have the public hearing on the Sustainability and Resilience Amendment to the Unified Land Use and Circulation Element.
Okay, we have Nicholas Dickerson here from Colliers Engineering, and Barbara Woolley Brown from Dylan, I don't know why, from NJDEP, who's overseeing this project on behalf of the state, so to make this presentation.
I'm sorry, what was her name, please? The name.
Nicholas Dickerson and Barbara Woolley Dylan. I don't
Thank
know
you.
why.
Yeah, I guess you're going to give testimony tonight, aren't you? Looks like you've done this before. Sir, do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record
And-
into
yes.
a microphone so we pick you up?
Nicholas Dickerson, with Colliers Engineering and Design, business address 101 Crawford's Corner Road in Holmdel, New Jersey.
Great, thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Again, my name's Nick Dickerson. I'm a planner with Colliers Engineering and Design. Been before this board, I think last time I was here was middle of March of this year to provide the first draft of the updated, I'm going to say it once and then I'm just going to use the acronym because it's a mouthful, the Climate Change Related Hazard Vulnerability Assessment, or CCR-HVA, which actually is less of a mouthful than the entire thing, but it's still a lot. Anyway, our project is part of a DEP-sponsored municipal assistance grant project where several communities throughout the state, I believe there's Harrison and Lambertville, and along with Montclair, 3 communities that were hit particularly hard during Tropical Storm Ida, to update its planning documents to reinforce resilience and not only update the CCR-HVA. Montclair was one of the first communities in the state to actually have one, so this was actually an update. And then also, the next part was to develop a resilience action plan. Most of my testimony tonight is going to focus on the CCR-HVA, and then I'm going to give a little bit of a preview of what's in store for the resilience action plan, because the CCR-HVA tees up the resilience action plan, and so want to just provide a little bit of what's in store and get some preliminary feedback on that resilience action plan, because that takes the recommendations from the CCR-HVA and starts to tee them up into more concrete recommendations and actions, identifying responsible entities, potential funding sources, and the potential cost behind each of those recommendations. So we are in the early stages of developing that part of the project, but again, since we have a CCR-HVA that we're presenting, we'd like to then just segue into that to get your feedback as well.
I just have one housekeeping issue. I want everybody to understand that this is the public hearing. We did notice all of the, we published notice in the paper, it's on the website. We sent the notice to all the adjoining municipalities, the county, and the state that tonight we are having a public hearing to officially amend our master plan to include this amendment. So I just wanted to provide that background.
Thank you.
I have a question which follows that. So in 2020, we passed, or the council passed a stormwater management plan, which is a part of the master plan. So what happens to that, that amended part of the master plan if this were to be accepted? Are they dovetail with each other, or does one replace the other? And I know that the stormwater management plan is just a part of this.
It's a separate element. That's a separate element of the master plan. So, okay. Well, but that, I would suppose that's being reviewed so there's no conflicts with what's being done with this, right?
So,
Have you looked at that?
we did not receive a copy of the stormwater element of the master plan. We did review the unified master plan, largely the land use element, and then actually most recently over the course of the summer, the housing element fair share plan. So we looked at that document, but the CCR-HVA is intended, it is a requirement of any municipality that is adopting a land use element. It was a new requirement by the state. They amended the municipal land use law, I believe, in 2021 for the CCR-HVA requirement. So it is fairly new, and it.
Well, I don't mean to cut you off, but my only suggestion is we have a stormwater management amendment to our master plan. You should read that, because it's part of the master plan.
We can certainly take a look. So, and we were also aware that actually Montclair was fortunate enough to not only be doing a municipal assistance grant project on the CCR-HVA and the Resilience Action Plan, but there was also work being done evaluating stormwater utility, and that was a separate project that was going on as well. And so we did note that as part of our document. So let me dive in here, assuming I know how to use a computer. There we go. So a lot of this I already covered, just providing a status update, and then going into some of the key findings of the document, some of the recommendations, and then where we are now, and then implementation. And that's where we get into the idea of the Resilience Action Plan. That will be the sneak peek at the end of the presentation here. So as I mentioned, there have been a lot of steps that have already been taken. We note that the master plan has been adopted and kept fairly, up to date. There's been multiple amendments over time, including the CCR-HVA that was originally adopted in 2023. Our office was then tasked with making an update to that document, working alongside DEP to make sure that we crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's on the municipal land use law requirements. So we looked at documents that had been adopted since then, incorporating them in, and developed a up-to-date CCR-HVA, which has involved, let's see, quite a bit of feedback. Numerous public engagement has taken place. We had a pop-up engagement at the Jazz Festival last fall at the Farmers Market. We originally started off our outreach actually with a presentation before Mayor and Council last summer, and then which we used to also kick off our digital survey, which was online from, let's see, I believe from August to about February of this year. The reason we kept it open so long was some of the feedback we got when we went to Mayor and Council was to make sure that we had it available in other languages. So DEP went back and managed to find translations in both Spanish and Creole, and those were added to the survey as well. And so then we got that information. This document has been prepared and reviewed with DEP. Like I said, I was here, I believe the date was March 17th of this year, and presented a draft document that looks probably nothing like you remember. We have some nice designers on staff who are able to take something that I would prepare in Word and make it look, readable. So that's why the document looks a little different. But we got feedback from that night. We got feedback after that night. There were written comments that were submitted to us, both from the Planning Board and the Environmental Commission. We reviewed these comments with the Planning Office, with the Office of Sustainability, and so that's what we've been doing since March. We've been working on that document, reviewing it, making changes, sending it off to the township and also DEP, addressing their comments, and finally, by early September, we were ready to share this revised draft. These slides already, I anticipate them, and I guess we address them. So, as I mentioned, it was a very iterative review process. There were numerous drafts circulated. We addressed comments and submitted it back, and we've tried to make sure that all the comments that we've received throughout this process have been addressed. And again, just noting that we really focused on several areas of climate resilience that affect Montclair, because there are certain things that the municipal land use law suggests we look at, but are not going to be applicable in a community like this, such as, say, sea level rise. But on the other hand, you have flooding, you have extreme heat, there is the threat of wildfire. It's not the same threat of wildfire that you'd see, say, in like the Pine Barrens, but there is a threat nonetheless. Parts of the town have risk of landslide, which can be exacerbated by extreme rain events. So those are the 4 main risks that we looked at. And again, we took the information. We originally started with just a vulnerability assessment where we just looked at these risks and how they related to infrastructure, socially vulnerable communities, and other aspects of the town, and then evaluated it against those risks, and then developed a series of recommendations. So our key findings. Again, we see flooding and stormwater, probably one of the more significant impacts, especially when we kicked this project off in April of 2024. That was when we drove through the town with representatives of the community. That was the big issue. We also did see the issue of heat, which continues to intensify as the climate continues to warm. And in areas where you have less coverage, you have more heat. We looked at the landslide-prone areas, like I said, and the wildfire interface. This is particularly true in more the wooded areas of the community, particularly near Eagle Rock Reservation. And again, we evaluate the impacts of flooding and stormwater, looking at vulnerabilities in different ways. We look at how it relates to existing development and then how it relates to proposed development and future development. We noted that over 2,000 parcels are within what is the 100-year floodplain, or the 1% annual chance floodplain, and then this is with the additional 3 feet that DEP is now looking for these inland areas. That equates to about $1.37 billion in assessed property value, which is at risk, or $45.3 million in annual tax revenue. We evaluated their impacts to schools, vulnerable communities such as senior housing, animal shelters, municipal facilities. We looked at extreme heat. We note that the higher surface temperatures are concentrated largely in the east and south parts of the town, notably in socially vulnerable block groups. We identified the at-risk populations, because we wanted to see at the census block group level where those vulnerabilities might exist. And we also note that along Bloomfield and Claremont, there is higher degrees of impervious surfaces, notably when you get towards the Lackawanna redevelopment area. You have a large black roofed building surrounded by a large parking lot, pretty high heat area. We looked again at landslide and wildfire risks, and just trying to take a very large document and try to boil it down to just some minor points here, and give you the Reader's Digest of what we were looking at. But there's a lot to take in there. So our aim is to, again, comply with the requirements of the municipal land use law for CCR HVA. We sought to integrate it with the township's master plan and some of the documents that have come before it, along with aligning it with the state's climate resilience strategy and its extreme heat action plan. And recommendations, we have a very large list of recommendations. I believe there's 58 in total, so not going to be listing those all out, but they focus on several main areas: township initiatives, ordinance changes, and policy document updates. And they're broken down into various different categories from there. And these recommendations in that document would then be taken into the resilience action plan and fleshed out a little bit more. And one of the other requirements is a policy statement, which is listed here. It's also in the document. I'll spare everyone from reading the entire thing, but it is one of the requirements of the municipal land use law for CCRHBA is to have a policy statement that ties this all together. So again, as mentioned, we're here for consideration and adoption of the Sustainability and Resilience Amendment as a component of the master plan. Then I'll be providing a little feedback, overview of the Resilience Action Plan and looking for your feedback there, because that will be the next document that I will be coming back here in probably a few more months and going through this process again. And yeah, here to look for your feedback on this. And then I can also dovetail right into the Resilience Action Plan. So I don't know if we want to break for any questions now or if I should just keep full steam ahead.
Just an overall principle. In the plan, what's touted is more density. It does have a caveat that the additional density would be, I can't find it right now, but Montclair was applauded for desiring more density, but I think it is meant to be in areas that are either undergoing redevelopment or already have dense development. So can you just comment on, how does increasing our density help us be more sustainable? Because, for example, even with adding an ADU is more impervious surface in zones. And I know that we need to detain or retain water runoff and so forth, but if you can just speak to your comments about the benefits of additional density as it applies to sustainability.
Certainly, that's a great question. I appreciate that. That comes from the recommendation in the at the end of the document, and that's just the specific wording of it is to continue to promote higher density, compact, mixed-use development in areas with appropriate infrastructure to reduce automobile dependency and reduce carbon footprint. So it's not necessarily a blanket density is good wherever, at all, like that. It is in areas where it makes sense, and that's what the smart growth refers to is, you want to concentrate development in some areas and limit development in other areas. And so, when you have in your town center, you want to have your density there so that you have access to shops and people can walk there and, allow those businesses to thrive. And, if they're within walking distance, you don't necessarily need a car. And so then you're reducing your carbon emissions that way. Again, high density everywhere, probably not as great because then, you're going to have people who are going to have to drive and be stuck in traffic to get to wherever they need to go. But you want to encourage people to be able to walk and accomplish many errands without the need for an automobile.
Thank you.
So,
would you mind just saying because I lost it, what page were you reading from
yes,
there?
certainly. This is, okay,
64.
so
64
64 or page 68 on the
Thank you.
PDF.
Other questions from the board?
I would just like if the planner tally maybe could also just put all of this into context for the people who maybe at home stumbled onto this channel. What documents are we looking at? How does this one fit into it? Just
Okay,
in,
absolutely.
yeah.
I think many of the planning board members know that, as Nick said, in 2021, the state required municipalities to amend their land use plan to address climate change-related hazard vulnerability assessments. And in fact, the state went so far as to say you cannot amend your master plan until you do this. So we did that in 2023. We did it in-house with staff writing the amendment. The planning board adopted it. And we actually spent a year going over what were some of the climate change issues. We had a subcommittee, Tony, I know you were on that subcommittee, and we focused on stormwater. That's clearly the biggest issue that Montclair has been addressing. Fast forward 2025, the state created this funding program to do a resilience plan, a resilience strategic plan to give us money to make the improvements that we all know are needed. However, before we can do that, we need a new and improved version of this portion of the master plan because we didn't go deep enough. We didn't have quite the expertise that Nick and Collier's engineering bring, and DEP and their resources bring to this effort. So that's how we got here. And it's been a learning experience, eye-opening experience. I think a lot of the information that Nick and his team provided in terms of like the heat map, I thought was very eye-opening. I hadn't seen that before. So I think, Tony, your question about the stormwater management plan, we did that in 2020, and that set the basis for some ordinance changes regarding impervious coverage. This builds on all of that work and takes it the next step further.
I think the opportunity, this is much broader than
Yes,
what we did. But
yes.
But the, flood protection is still very much a part of that. So my suggestion is just look at the work that we've done already and sort of use that as a basis. And maybe that amendment that amendment could actually be retired. Because if this is covering stormwater, because then we'll have we'll have the amendment that was passed in 2020, which covers stormwater, and then another one which is covering stormwater. So we should just make sure.
But actually, honestly, those are two different animals. Again, the state required us also to prepare a stormwater management plan, which led to those ordinance changes. So the state is requiring us to do both. We had to do the master plan to support the changes to our ordinance to make our stormwater ordinances consistent with the state back in 2020. This is a little bit different.
Okay.
And as you say, it's much broader, but the two should not be conflicting, really.
And I just want to add, I appreciate everything that Janice had mentioned, but the document that was originally prepared laid a great foundation for us to actually build upon. There was a tremendous amount of information, and we would not have been able to bring it to this level had it not been for that effort that had originally been taken place. So, well, I appreciate the feedback. Thank you for what you did.
Sorry, just one last, and the slide deck that you're showing us tonight is information that was used for this report. Is that correct?
Yes.
It is not a separate study that sits alone and will be adopted or kept as a public document.
You mean the original climate change related hazard?
What are we looking at on the screen right now?
Okay.
That's what I'm asking. How does that?
This is, we're talking still about the CCR HVA. I have not gone into the second of our double feature here on the Resilience Action Plan. And I will say the Resilience Action Plan, it's my understanding, and I don't know if DEP guidance has changed, but a Resilience Action Plan is not necessarily like any amendment to the master plan. It just takes what the master plan says and outlines basically a strategic plan going forward. I don't believe there's anything that requires that to be a component of the master plan.
Do you want me to be sworn in if I'm talking?
Yes, it will be my pleasure.
Okay, great. Oops, that's okay.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and affiliation, business affiliation, for the
Yes.
record?
It's Barbara Allen Woolley Dillon, and I'm with NJDEP. Following up on what Nick said, the Resilience Action Plan gives the municipality a toolkit moving forward. You can then link this into your capital improvements plan so that when you're making decisions for how to improve the township, what's next, what your priorities are, Nick's team is going to develop a list of actions for you that look at the cost, the feasibility, the technical assistance, grants that are out there. This helps set you up to ease the decision-making moving forward so that you as a community have a great basis. And obviously flooding is your biggest concern. It was one of the things that was, I can't say enough, impressed upon me enough when Nick and I went through the township. So this is really going to be helpful, not just with your flooding, but if you have other areas like the heat items, this will help you with those resilience items to make the township bounce forward, if you will, and give you a great blueprint. It also sets you up, should state funding become available. We like to prioritize communities that have been through this process. We are well aware of it. We always make sure that we lead with decisions and support communities that have been through this, knowing that you've gone through this effort to take the time, make the plan, move forward, create an action plan for yourselves. We take that very seriously, and that helps us to make really great decisions, and we use that when we award grants and move forward. It's one of those, it's kind of like a great incentive, and we think it's really a good thing to help communities that have taken the time and engaged with DEP, the state, and other agencies. And it's really great for the regional projects. For the municipal projects, it's fantastic because it really gets down to the meat of the matter and how to help you make decisions that will get you moving forward.
Thanks, Barbara.
Go ahead.
I guess I was wondering, kind of to Tony's point, when you have kind of two different recommendations that are somewhat conflicting, right? Density is objectively good for any number of reasons regarding carbon and all that, plus the development, new development is generally going to meet a better stormwater standard than pre-existing development. And so like you can have the same impervious coverage and it responds much better in a storm environment. But at the same time, right, more development in any given place is going to put a strain on the stormwater system. Like, how do you balance those two? Is there a process by which they're weighed? Does the community that you're working with play a role? Like, what goes into those decisions?
Certainly. So, lots to unpack there.
Yeah, and I know you probably worked with a team on this, and so you're one person.
Yes.
But.
So, again, when you focus, like, again, with the idea of smart growth development, typically a downtown area, smaller footprints, it's not, someplace out, you think of, was that exit 7 on the Turnpike where you have, million square foot warehouses, like large tracts of land with huge amounts of impervious coverage. You are looking at smaller areas, so you're able to concentrate development and on smaller areas. So you're, all in all, it's going to be a less of a footprint that's going to generate like stormwater than say something like that. And so, and I mean, I recognize that Montclair doesn't have large tracts that would support that type of development, but still, most tracts of land in the downtown are going to be smaller than, when you leave the downtown. And so, your impact overall is going to be less. And also redevelopment, in my experience, you're usually, it gives you an opportunity to then actually take the old infrastructure, which may be 100+ years old, stormwater, water, wastewater, and actually reinvest in it so that it improves the entire system in that area. So I'm probably not addressing all of that question, but I guess that's, I'm hoping that's a start.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions from the board?
We're chatting, I mean, like a follow-up would be, if we had 4 acres with no detention or retention basin, if there's new development that's dense, if it did have detention or retention, it would help.
Yeah.
At least to kind of slow the water flow. So that's where it would, where it would work well. But in general, in general, the more stuff we build, the more demand there's going to be on electricity, water, power.
Yeah, and it's tough, right? Because we're 6 square miles in a state of 8,000, in a country of however many, in a world of however many billions, right? And so the decisions we make on, say, density, right, are definitely good for everyone, right? But that includes people who aren't in those 6 square miles, whereas that flooding is a very proximate harm, right? Like, we are the ones dealing with the floodwaters in a way that we are not so clearly dealing with the carbon emissions, even though there's more rain because of those carbon emissions, right? And even though the heat is greater because of those carbon emissions. And so, like, me walking to downtown is not making it less likely to flood, right? But it is making it that much better for the rain and heat effects of carbon emissions. And so it's like, how do I balance the proximate gain with the bigger communal gain? And like, that's the push and pull.
I think one of the things to add to the discussion about density is this board has talked about as part of our master plan reexamination that we started, questions about where we want to have more density, right? And so, there's concerns about the existing density and the approved density along the Bloomfield Avenue corridor. There's been discussions about perhaps pushing other density along the train line and such. And so that's another factor that has to be considered here when we're starting to balance, all these different pieces. Density in this construct for climate change hazards, yes, that it's a good thing, but it may not be the right thing, as you said, in all areas of the township and the municipality. And so I want to make sure that we're not saying that, push density everywhere, push density in certain spots. This statement is really about, in terms of climate change hazards, density is a good thing, but we need to be careful about where that density goes.
Correct. Again, just to continue with this discussion here, when you think about, if you can put, more units in one area, it's, the amount of stormwater generated, for example, is going to be significantly less than if you have, the same number of single-family houses that are created with their own roofs and their own driveways. It creates more of an impervious surface that way than if you have it all under one roof. And so again, that's why, we're not necessarily saying where, but we're saying to focus on smart growth density. So again, in your downtowns, in areas where there's already development, rather than, hey, there's a wooded area, let's go build, a lot there.
Yeah, and I think part of it also matters what type of building is happening. And so a bigger project has greater capacity to upgrade stormwater infrastructure and retention and detention than a smaller project, right? Whoever's building a single family home, there's a lesser impact, but their capacity to account for that is also less, just because there's not as much money there.
And, sorry.
Yeah. And so, and there's that. And then I also think, so it was going to happen. We all knew it was going to happen. Parking plays a big part in both the density conversation, the heat impacts, and the stormwater, right? Parking is impervious coverage. Impervious coverage is really bad for both stormwater, because it keeps the water from getting into the ground, and it contributes to the heat island effect because it's black asphalt. And when you can build densely and with less asphalt, and so you can have the same number of people on a parcel if you don't park nearly as many cars, and leave more green space, have a smaller footprint for the building, right? And I think that's something to really think about. A huge share of our township is roads, and roads are paved, and roads are heat island. And if we narrowed those down and allowed for green space on the curb cuts and set aside more of the right-of-way for bioswales, right, that helps stormwater. There's a lot of space we dedicate to cars, and that space is generally not good for any of these problems we're facing, and doesn't help any of them. And so I had to get that in there.
And just one other thing I wanted to add to that was, so when we took our little field trip around town, I believe that was in April of last year, the big issue we saw was just I don't know if it was piecemeal the way it was originally done, but the series of culverts that are used to collect stormwater throughout town, some that get bigger and then they get really tiny, and then you have water that backs up and then it gets big again, and then some are collapsing and some are part of people's basement walls. And the way you're going to address that is going to be through redevelopment. And again, so noting that you want to focus your development efforts there, that gives you that opportunity to then correct for that infrastructure that was haphazardly made so many years ago. And this is that opportunity to fix that and account for a system that now is largely developed. And so you can have a well thought of system that you're not going to have wide to narrow to wide, and so again, another thing that we try to recommend throughout this document.
So I have a question about that. I don't really understand that, because the culverts, as I know them, are mostly in places that are already developed. I mean, the town is mostly already developed out, and B, with the new 3-foot standard, you wouldn't want to be developing anywhere near them, right?
With the culverts, I mean, I'm talking about even ones that go through parking lots, like under buildings. They, you know, we only saw basically a half day's worth, but knowing that they were in already developed areas, the way you're going to address that ultimately will be through the future redevelopment of those sites.
I do need to mention this because I'll probably sound like a broken record on this, but our pipes are clogged. They need to be cleaned out. I've said it. And it's not just to redevelop it, but, you know, we talked 5 years ago about scoping what's there. And you can walk around and you can see where tree stumps, branches, rocks, and so forth have litter. I mean, if you looked at those culverts 50 years ago, they probably would have been better maintained, or, you know.
Certainly.
So I think it's just a matter of property management and maintenance.
Oh, absolutely. That's one part of that.
That needs to be done.
Absolutely.
Was it the township that purchased the Vector unit? And were they out? I think they were out in front of my house today.
Yeah, I know that we were scheduled to receive it, but we might just received it like literally
I don't know,
this
there's-
or last week.
Somebody, well, actually, you know what? It was on Bradford, so I don't know. I mean, that's a county road, but they had the Vector unit out in the middle of the road
Yeah,
working in the storm sewer.
yeah. The township has had a new Vector on order for quite some time, and yeah, we were supposed to receive it, if not this week, I think maybe next week.
There's a
So-
consulting firm, a contractor that's been doing some work. They did it on
Okay.
Christopher, and they opened up and backed out, not just the inlets, but also the main pipe.
Yeah, this was one of the main pipes, I believe, that either goes across Bradford or up and down Bradford. And just while we're on stormwater, this plan did actually evaluate the stormwater element. You know, there's a section in here about compatibility with it. I'm on PDF page 65, which is page 61 of the document. And it does discuss the tie-in. Probably could talk a little bit more about the overlap between the two documents, but it is in there. So I believe, Mr. Dickerson, you all did consider it as part of this evaluation.
Oh, yep, we did. There's a lot in this document, so.
Sure is. I just want to point that out because Mr. Ian Wally had raised what I thought was a really good point earlier about how did these two line up? Because, you know, one of the recommendations in this plan here is to do a wellhead protection ordinance. And there's a lot of discussion in the stormwater element about that, including maps of where those protection ordinance areas would be. So just making sure that they're linked together, and it looks like they are here, although I think it could be stronger, but at least they acknowledge each other. Then the one other thing that I had, and this isn't to take away from the great work that's here, but this needs some copy editing throughout, you know, just one last time to go through, like, you know, there's spots where Montclair is misspelled. You know, the street known as Watchung is Watching, which happens frequently, right? Autocorrect always puts it as Watching when I type it in. So like I said, I don't want to take away, you know, from the great
No, I
work that's
appreciate
been
that.
done here. But before we put this, you know, if that's what the board decides to do, is put this into our master plan, I want to make sure it looks the
Absolutely.
way we expect it to look.
Certainly.
Right? And some of the Montclair misspellings are in the GIS maps, so a little bit harder to spell check, but
Yeah.
also important, you know, to me
Yeah.
personally, and I presume to the board and to the community.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, no. When you take something out of Word and you put it into InDesign, I mean, it looks nicer, but then unfortunately you don't get the little red squiggly lines that remind
Correct.
you.
Correct.
There's also a marketing pitch on page 6, and it's sort of funny in a way. It says, Montclair is paving the way toward a more resilient future. I don't think we want to say we're paving the way toward a resilient future.
Yeah, that's a pretty bad pun. I'm sorry about
This
that.
is heading towards, or, you know.
I did want to ask a question too about landslides. Are there areas that are, you know, in neighboring municipalities that are of a higher elevation to us in Montclair? And does that cause any issues that we should be noting in here?
That's a good question. I would have to double check to see how those risk areas you know, or if there's other additional risk areas outside the town. Our focus was generally on the township.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but, I'm just thinking, is the municipal boundary on the ridge line? Probably not, but maybe it is. I don't know. You're nodding yes.
I've seen it, so where are? I took a visit to the big water tanks that we have that are sitting inside Cedar Grove, and the ridge, and the line, the border is below the ridge line there, I
Okay.
believe, because that's on Cedar Grove. And you look at it, and you could get some runoff or some landslide, but I don't know.
And then for these landslide susceptibility areas, and I'm on PDF page 61, it's a map of landslide susceptibility. Does this account for, I don't know how to say this well, the effects of the landslide? So if the land slides and moves, are these boundaries accounting for that movement, or are these are the unstable soil type areas? don't know,
I would
Mr.
have to
Brennan?
double check the answer on that one. I would assume it's based on soil type, and thus, that's why those areas would be at risk. I don't know if there would be any account for, dynamic movement there.
This
Yeah.
is page 56 for those of you who have paper copies.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Thank you.
56 and 57, yes. To me, it would seem like there could be risk areas even further downslope than these highlighted areas. And I don't know, Mr. Hernandez, if you wanted to say a word about that or not, I wasn't sure if you're trying to make a comment.
No, but I think
Okay.
your point is well made. Something that should be considered as well.
Okay. Yeah, because that's one thing that comes to my mind with landslides, is that may not be where the unstable soils are, but it's downslope of that to where homes and people could be affected.
True, and I think, again, some of these things are worth also diving into as part of that resilience action plan, because then we're taking this to the next level, because maybe it is looking at these types of soils and the surrounding areas.
Yeah, like, I'm no landslide expert, but I've got to imagine there's a way to quickly and easily model, if you've got this slope and these soils slide, how far does it go?
Correct.
And that could help you understand, what are the real impacts around that?
By the way, we are working on an update to our steep slope ordinance, so,
Chair.
related to
Yes.
that.
One more question. Could you just explain, on the areas that you highlighted in blue in the maps, the design flood elevation, you noted in parens it says 1% plus 3 feet. Can you explain what that means for us?
Correct. So that's the new standard that recently came out from the state to account for some of these more, torrential rain events that we're getting. So it's the 1% chance is the 100-year flood.
Oh, okay.
And then you're adding an additional 3 feet to account for, again, when we get these like massive rainstorms. I believe from what I've seen in the maps, it generally corresponds with like almost the 500-year floodplain. Because we always talk about, I'm seeing, 300-year storms in a year, what's the deal here? And so the guidance from DEP or the regulation now is to account for that additional, it's the inland flood requirements. And so we want to look at that because as part of a CCR HVA, you need to look to the future. Like generally it's a 100-year horizon or a 2100 horizon, so it's not really 100 years from now anymore. But, looking ahead to account for that because as part of this document, you look at the potential for future development and, note whether or not, do we want to be building in areas at risk?
So the 1%, which is the 100-year plus 3 feet, is that the new inland recommended elevation?
Yes.
Okay. So that matches it, which is above a FEMA map. If you look at a FEMA map,
Correct.
would it be 3 feet lower or some other, or is it?
Yeah, it's the 100-year plus 3 feet.
And is that beyond a recommendation? Is that a requirement?
I am not nearly as familiar with the
Okay.
specifics of the inland flood rule. I just know that we wanted to account for it as part of the future-facing look at this document, because again, we keep seeing these rainstorms, and, people who, you see the story, several times a year where it's, I didn't know I was in a floodplain, and these people weren't necessarily in a floodplain, but now they are because of the rainstorms that we're starting to get.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I mean, that's one of the big things that we see here in the municipality. That's why stormwater was such a hot button issue these last, couple of years that you've been working on this, because we've had some of those torrential rains, and that actually, it was right around the time when we all went out and did the surveys for the original CCR HVA. It was right after one of those, and it was glaringly obvious. The erosion down the sides of the streets, the pileup of debris, at the bottom of those areas too, and you could just see how bad the flooding was in areas that there would be no flood elevation because there's no water body anywhere nearby. So that is something that's key for this municipality.
Just a question on some of the maps. They highlight the 100-year floodplain, but then also flood-prone areas. I used to live in one of those flood-prone areas, and I never quite understood, it's flooding all the time, but it's not part of the 100-year floodplain. And how do you distinguish those two things?
Trying to jump to one of those maps to see what you're referring to here. Any specific map?
The first one in Appendix B, maybe.
Page 34 or 35 of the printed document.
Okay, 34, okay. Oh, okay. So 34 and 35, these are actually the maps that were originally created as part of the 2023 CCR HVA. We liked them. We wanted to keep them because it did try to show the correlation between, it showed impervious surfaces in addition to the flood-prone areas. The flood-prone areas, I believe, and Janice, please correct me if I'm wrong here, I think those were the areas that had been identified by the municipality as having flood, flood events, but are not necessarily located on a FEMA map.
I guess then I wonder, how do they not end up on a FEMA map? What is it? I guess, how does the FEMA map figure out its flooding versus?
It's a long...
And that may be above your pay grade.
I have a CFM after my name. I don't use it very often, so if, I can probably say the basics of it, and then I probably can't go any further. But the development of a FEMA map, it's only every so often, and generally, they start off with I believe it's 20-foot contour maps, so you're not always, the specificity that goes into what is in a floodplain is not always the most exact, and then you can drill down and request a map amendment, which is something people do, because sometimes you'll be told that, you have to buy flood insurance because you're in a flood-prone area, and then, you as a property owner can then seek an amendment to that by, providing evidence saying, actually, my property's at this elevation, the floodplain is at this elevation, and it can change in one way or another. So it is an imperfect science. I'm sure it will continue to get better as, we're able to do this type of mapping, and you see with LiDAR and stuff being able to show much. Oh, thank you.
I'll try and be sworn in, yes. My name is Natalie, and I work with Barbara at DEP, so I wanted to offer. My name is Natalie Agosto Filion. I am the Deputy Chief Climate Resilience Officer for the state of New Jersey, and I work closely with Barbara. And what I wanted to contribute here...
Let's swear you in before we...
Of course.
Humor me.
Please, please.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and affiliation again?
Of course. Natalie Agosto Filion, NJDEP.
And can you spell your last name, please?
Sure. I'll spell my whole name because they're all hard. Nathally. Agosto is Agos, as in Sam, T as in Tom, O. Filion is F as in Frank, ILION. And what I wanted to share about FEMA maps that I think is so particularly difficult for folks to sort of grapple with, folks in the community regularly, understanding or looking for direction as to where it floods, but FEMA maps have a core purpose as actuarial, right? If you have a federally backed mortgage, FEMA tells you where you're required to have flood insurance in order to be able to get a federally backed mortgage. And it is based, as Nick was saying, on, floodway contour maps, but that doesn't necessarily reflect the reality of how we're receiving precipitation in New Jersey, which has increased and is predicted to increase anywhere from 200 to 500% increase in rainfall amounts. And so what we're experiencing doesn't match the maps, because those maps have a different purpose than telling people where it is likely to flood based on the data that we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Of course, thanks.
And then, Mr. Neven, for the other half of your question, these areas that are in red, that's part based on observations, part based on the township engineer's office, and also where residents have called in complaints about flooding. So there is a bit of a disconnect from the FEMA, but that's where a lot of those red areas came from when you started this process several years ago. Those were kind of like the most urgent areas that we in the township,
Right.
the planning department, the engineers department said, this is where we should focus.
And quite often, the flooding wasn't because of streams, it was because of our existing stormwater infrastructure was undersized, there was problems, so it had to do with our own infrastructure.
Yeah, so some of these areas are just low-lying, but outside of the FEMA designated flood zones. For example, if you're looking on page 34, the area highlighted in red of Park Street, that's just south of the trestle as you cross under Watchung Avenue. There's like a gully right in that area. It's a low spot, and there's a pipe that carries out to the stream, which is in the regulated FEMA flood zone. But that area is just outside of it, but it's just a natural low point that's susceptible to flooding. So that's kind of where.
Sure, I have a quick one for the engineer. And we have had, when we have a storm, two storms, subsequent storms, and they have different results, which they've had, that are very stark. So bad flooding in one case at Park and Bloomfield, and then a subsequent storm, and I can't keep track of these storms, where there was no flooding there, but there was a lot, I believe, at Pine and Claremont or around there.
Yeah.
This could be because of the performance of our stormwater infrastructure acting differently or something, so.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's not just that places are low-lying or that it's out of kilter with a FEMA map that is static. It's that different storms will do different things.
It's extremely fluid, well, no pun intended.
Right.
The situation, may dictate very different results. I know that situation, I could recall that at Pine and Claremont, which is typically not a real hot spot where we would expect it. There's lots of catch basins in the area, so it's not necessarily a deficiency in the system there. It's a freak of nature sometimes, and there are instances where these drains get clogged by just debris, which isn't necessarily something that happens all the time, which also exacerbates the issues in certain instances. But these are just areas in general that have a history of repeated flooding, not necessarily meaning that it happens every single storm, but just a general idea of where we think the problem areas lie.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why maintenance is important. Like during that survey, we found some catch basins that were full to the top of debris and didn't function as anything but pavement at that point.
Yeah, and to that point, over the last year, we've had field crews walking the entire township, identifying all the catch basins and manholes in the township to map those out. And as we're mapping those out, we're identifying those exact areas. Some areas are clogged, we are logging those, then providing those to Public Works, so that now that we have the Vector, they can go out and perform those maintenance and kind of catch up to where we need to be and perform that maintenance program.
Much needed maintenance, and I'm glad the process is working, right? It certainly takes a lot of time to, marshal the resources, both in labor and finances, but once we get there, we can really improve some of these issues. Other questions or comments from the board? Are there members of the public that would like to ask questions or provide comments on this? If you wouldn't mind, raise your hand and just get a general sense. Yeah, okay, so we got people. If you all want to, you can either come up individually, you can line up over off to the side. If you do line up off to the side, just watch the cord. But if you have questions and you want to come up, please come up to the lectern, give us your name and address, and ask away. And I'd ask you to try and keep it to 3 minutes if you can. There's not too many people that want to provide comment, but just we do have an application on after this.
Good evening. Hi, good evening. I'm Anna Grossman. There's no way I can keep this to 3 minutes. I'm going to talk about a topic that you guys haven't talked about. So I have some questions. How come instead of using the word heat island, you chose hotspot? Because as far as I know, hotspot, it really relates more to like contaminated areas.
No, we were just using it as, I mean, because again, we were looking at a heat map and we were looking to see where the hot spots were based on temperature from the maps that we had evaluated.
I just would like to request that you go back to the term heat island. To me, I think it's more accurate because hotspots really, look into it if you could. All right. The maps that you're using are almost 10 years old. So for example, the tree inventory, the tree canopy, it's almost 10 years old. We don't have a current one. So I see a bit of a problem with that. And the same with the heat islands. There's been areas that have had additional artificial turf added, and that's not reflected in that document.
So, okay, so I'm not aware of a new tree canopy map that has been developed. We had gone out and looked for one. That information was not available, so we were using the latest and greatest, which unfortunately is not always, as late and great as we want.
Yeah, because we've lost I think 2,000 ash trees and many, many more. And I mean, just if you look at Google Earth and you do the chronology, it's dramatic.
And concerning the heat map, at the time we had started this, the 2016 map that was available from Sustainable Jersey was the latest and greatest. It also provided the most specificity that we wanted to see in terms of being able to see temperature gradations. More recently, a new map, which is not in this document, 2022, was released by DEP. And in looking at it, in preparing for this hearing tonight, I did check against a lot of different areas, and actually there's limited change. I didn't do any sort of quantitative analysis, but eyeballing it against what has changed from 2016 to 2022, the information is fairly consistent.
You should look at Essex Field in particular. They added 4 acres of artificial turf since 2016. So the map that you have doesn't show the north area as being as hot as the south area, but now it's 15 acres of a heat island. And they've removed oak trees, like 21 mature oak trees, so it's dramatically different. And since you've called out Woodman Field in particular as a hotspot, I would update that if I were you. Okay. Again, with artificial turf, on page 10, you say, additional hotspots include athletic fields that utilize certain forms of artificial turf, with the athletic fields at Essex Park showing the highest values. What do you mean when you say certain forms of artificial turf?
What I mean is that they're not all created equal when it comes to artificial turf. There's different technologies available. I reviewed this.
What are those different technologies?
There's different things that you can construct them with, whether you're using rubber versus recycled plastic. There's different ways of maintaining temperature that can involve water. There's also the question of whether or not they're shaded in the areas. We did do some research on this. I did speak with our landscape design team that works on these fields. And then also actually looking at these heat maps and looking at them over time, looking at the heat maps and trying to draw correlations when you look at the different artificial fields throughout town, they register different heat values. Not all of them are creating like these red hotspots versus they don't all register the same values. And so there's technology.
Did you go and measure the heat on each one?
Looking at the heat map, we
Oh,
weren't
okay.
doing any field.
So I've gone and measured most of them, and do you know the difference between grass and artificial turf is between about 40 to 70 degrees hotter?
I am aware that they do generate more temperatures, but again, without knowing what technologies each thing has, how it was built, when it was built, I could not, and we are also getting a little far beyond the scope of this project.
I think my problem is that you're using the word technologies, and it sounds like you're using industry language, and I'm really offended by that, and that one of our documents in this town would have industry language. There is no technology. It's made of polyethylene. Infills vary. They're all petrochemical unless they have organic infills. And even artificial turf without infill is hot, between 30 and 70 degrees hotter than grass. And we're talking about climate vulnerability hazards, and one of the least sustainable things in the world is plastic grass, and there's not a mention in this document about moving away from it. In fact, you're greenwashing. You're talking about technologies that don't exist, cooling technologies. Why couldn't you just say, let's move away from it? It's about sustainability. I don't understand why it's even considered an option in this kind of document, which is mostly aspirational, because whether or not we're going to even be able to achieve this, but we're basically creating a document here that says artificial turf is fine. How can we say that? I mean, you're DP.
Well, isn't that the purpose of the next document that's coming?
That's correct. And
But they didn't make a recommendation. And the Montclair Environmental Commission asked them to specifically the MEC's recommendation was for you guys to move away from artificial turf. And there's not a single word in this document about doing that. Nor is there a word about playground surfaces.
Would you like me to answer the question?
I would.
Okay. DEP is currently in the process of undertaking a study to look at artificial turf fields. We are looking at it from a number of perspectives: the chemical composition, the heat, just a whole host of things. I am not that technical when it comes to all that. I'm a planner by nature. We at DEP don't tell the municipality what to do. I have worked for several municipalities that take different positions. Some of them advocate for artificial turf fields. Some of them prefer the natural. We understand at DEP that so much goes into making this decision. There is the use of the field. Do we want to play more? We understand with natural surfaces, when you get a ton of rain, it's flooded out. It is not for us to tell you at this point in time as a municipality what to do. We can't advocate for anything until we have the study that is compiled, prepared, finished, finalized, and released. So DEP doesn't take the position at this time to mandate what a municipality does. It is the municipality's choice.
But our environmental commission asked you to do something and you didn't do it, and you are actually taking a position when you use industry language that doesn't exist, technologies, cooling technologies for artificial turf that do not exist, or when you when you refer to artificial turf as in ways that don't exist. And separately, you are making recommendations in this document, and this document is about sustainability. It's not about how to get the most playing hours out of something. So you should stick to what is more sustainable. Is plastic sustainable? Are heat islands sustainable? They're not.
That is for the township to decide what is more sustainable.
But the township is relying on this grant to get scientific information about what is sustainable and what is not sustainable, and you're not calling out the least sustainable material in our town, nor are you calling out PIP surfaces in playgrounds.
I'm sorry, what is PIP?
Poured in place plastic, which is what is also causing heat islands and extremely hot temperatures in playgrounds. And look, I love DEP, but you guys, the E is environment, the P is protection, right? So, you know, when you're doing a document like this and you've got language in it that literally sounds like copy pasted from manufacturers of artificial turf, I am going to call it out here.
If you could allow me to go back to the what the word that seems to be causing some concern here, which is technology. Artificial turf has been in place for some time. Technologies have changed and shifted. I think that's why that broader term was used, depending on the age of the field, without studying specifically when each field was constructed. So I believe that is why that term was used, because we weren't sure when each of the fields was installed.
Okay. My other question, you refer to the DEP memo on stormwater for artificial turf. Why do you not refer to the DEP memo that that indicates that there is PFAS in artificial turf? There's no mention of PFAS in your document at all, as it relates to artificial turf. Yet your own agency has a memo about PFAS in artificial turf and how it's a concern about how it can go into stormwater and contaminate. There's no mention. Okay, that's one. I'll move on.
Would you like me to answer the question?
Let me finish my questions and you can absorb them.
Okay.
In page 64, you say where existing artificial turf fields exist, explore improvements that help to mitigate surface temperatures. What do you mean by that?
I think it speaks for itself, because we are acknowledging where these things do exist for future management of those fields to see if there are improvements that would fix those temperatures. So maybe
Like
it's
what?
maybe it could be planting trees around the area that create more shade. Again, these things can be explored in further detail as part of the Resilience Action Plan. But we are trying to see, if you have something already in place, what types of enhancements can you use to mitigate those impacts? Because again, when you look at the heat map and you look at these fields, they don't all register the same temperature. And so without conducting an analysis of each individual field, when it was created, how it was created, what impacts that allow it to attract and retain more heat, I'm not comfortable making a recommendation one way or another, but noting that because, yes, if exposed to direct sunlight, that they are hotter, what can be done to mitigate those impacts?
Do you really think there's an artificial turf field that does not heat up between 30 and 70 degrees more than grass? Does it exist?
I believe it does, yes.
You do?
Yes.
Is that because you work for an engineering firm that installs them regularly in many, many towns?
And I spoke with them to understand which ones, are they all the same? And the answer is no.
They are all the same, and that's why I'm saying this document contains industry speak directly from Colliers. Thank you for confirming that. Okay, so my last thing is, how come in the wildfire, risk, you put artificial turf as low risk? It burns in wildfires. Ask people in California. Not only does it burn, when it burns, it's toxic.
We were evaluating, you look at the wildfire risk maps, and those are based on the land use in place. So again, you look at a place in the Pine Barrens, you're going to have certain risks when you have lots of dead vegetation on the ground that can ignite and cause a fire. Here, you don't have that. We looked at the wooded areas, and then you have what's considered urbanized areas, which would include any sort of buildings, artificial turf, things like that. We were looking at the risk map that was produced, I believe, by DEP, that shows where the risk is in relation to wildfire fuel.
Okay, well, artificial turf, unless it's heavily treated with chemical flame retardants, is wildfire fuel. Just ask anyone in California. I'll move on. The tree preservation ordinance is outdated. It's not adequately enforced. The tree replacement schedule is not in line with our net tree canopy loss. It's on a 1-to-1 ratio, which I don't even think is compliant with what DEP says, let alone is going to maintain our tree canopy. And you have no mention about updating it there, nor about protecting mature trees, nor about land clearing, which is something that the zoning board has talked about when it comes to removing many, many trees. We have no protection for mature trees in this document, let alone in this town. So, I mean, I think that's it. I just am really disappointed by the fact that this document looks like it was written by a turf company.
I can address the answer on the tree replacement because prior to joining DEP, I represented clients in the private sector in West Orange Township. One of the questions that came to me was a new tree replacement ordinance, and I did have to see, as a planner on a project where they were not exactly in favor of the development, I'll put it that way, they were concerned about replacing the trees. DEP's requirement, I, as having done private sector work, prefer a 2-to-1, 2.5-to-1, even 3-to-1, but that's not DEP standard. DEP is currently 1-to-1, so your ordinance is consistent with that.
Noted the Environmental Commission is working on updating the ordinance.
And I'll also note that we do have a recommendation in there that says to amend the township's tree ordinances to prohibit tree removal near a ridge line or where removal may impair the growth of other nearby trees. So we do address trees, and we note that the town has taken action in the past as well.
Good evening. My name is Frank Rapacki. I'm a resident in town. I had some order to my questions. There are not that many. I'll try to keep it as close to 3 minutes as I can. Who owns the recommendations in the document? Are those going to be ours, or are they going to be some third party? In other words, this document that's going into our master plan, this is what the townspeople are recommending?
We prepared this document for the township, and then once we've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's, we hand it off to the township, and they can do with it as they want. It's my understanding that we are here for seeking adoption as a component of the master plan.
Okay, so you guys are going to adopt those recommendations as being the recommendations of the township?
If the board so chooses,
If
yes.
the board so chooses, okay. So the document is very large. If you guys have all read the document, God bless you. It's too long. Cut out, reformat it, get rid of the pictures, make them smaller, make the map small, do whatever you can, but we have, how many elements now in the master plan? 6, 7, 8? There
Yes.
are anywhere
Somewhere in there.
from 60 to 170 pages, not
Yes.
counting addendums. Please, have mercy on me.
I count
We-
seven
Okay,
elements.
we can't read them all. No one reads them all. I try to read them all, and I'm the exception in this town, so please shorten it. I did a quick thing. I could shorten it to basically under 40 pages easily of what you did in that document, not counting the addendums. I don't understand the addendums. Speaking of the addendums, Addendum A is the vulnerability, the disadvantaged community index. Okay, that's got to go. The data is horrible. And my point is, no one's looking at that data, because if you look at the data, it doesn't make any sense. First of all, I live in the north end of town. One of the districts, part of the area, the census tract I live in, is 53%. What's the word they use? People of color. It's not a census term. I don't know where it came from. Who owns that document, by the way? Who owns that appendix? Where does that come from?
The data was compiled using the EPA's Environmental Justice Screener, which doesn't exist anymore. Information from...
So we can get rid of it, right? Because...
We have to evaluate social vulnerability and impacts on
Okay,
climate.
you can't use that document because it's seriously flawed. I mean, if you look at it, seriously, just look at it for the math. In the south end, according to that document, it's 90% minority. It's 80% minority. I don't know, I don't think you live in an 80%, in that segregated a part of town. It might be 70, it might be 65, but it's not 90. There's nowhere in town that's 90. Okay? It says that in one of our census tracts, we have 0 unemployment. In the South End, amazing. We have only 304 households with a population of, according to the census tract, of, let's just say it's 1,200, 13, I forget the number, which means that we have household sizes of 4.5 to 5 people. The numbers make absolute, they're asterisks, they're pound signs in some of the data fields, where I guess the figure was too big and it couldn't fit.
Yep.
That's part of the copy editing that I was
But I
mentioning.
mean, if you just look at the numbers from a common sense point of view, they're horrible. They're absolutely horrible. And that's one of my big peeves with this town, is we don't look at census information. You and I look, well, we've been here for ages. We just know what the town is. Well, unfortunately, the town has changed. It's changed a lot. And we're not looking at the census information, and we're not looking at it for comprehension. And this document, you take it out. You don't need it. It's bad. It shouldn't be part of our master plan because it makes us look like master idiots. Okay, so please, I'm sorry, that's as passionate I'm going to get tonight on that one.
Well, let me just stay on that real quick. Didn't we look at those, at the latest census data for the housing element?
We did. The housing plan information is different from the information in this document, and I'll let Nick and Barbara explain why the data here is different, because I had the same questions.
Yes, this has been a very long conversation. And again...
Welcome to Montclair. We have a lot of long conversations about things.
Because we are looking at social vulnerability and we want to see where those impacts take place, it's one thing to look at the township as a whole. It's another thing to look at it when you break it down into the smallest available units. And so we looked at on the block group level. And the data that we were pulling from to figure out where the potential vulnerabilities might exist, we used various different screens. We used EPA's environmental justice screen. We looked at DEP's overburdened communities analysis, and then we looked just to see where, based on some of the potential social vulnerabilities, where is it less than the average as a whole, just to see, making sure that nothing falls between the cracks, to see where are areas that potentially could be at risk. And that is how we developed this analysis, by looking at things at the block group level, because you're not going to find things if you look at it on the township level. So we wanted to see on a more granular scale.
And I look at it on a block group level, and I can tell you where all the block groups are. And I'm telling you, your data's bad. Because the same block group, if you're using census information, your numbers don't make any sense. It's not the same. It's vastly different. You're off hundreds of households. You're off hundreds of people, okay? And I can point them out to you. It's not hard. I have a spreadsheet that shows exactly what the census says and what the block group says. And your data at the block group level goes south very quickly when you get into these social characteristics. The deviation level, you would probably know this, is probably close to 40%, if not higher on average. So when you quote a number that says, this is what the South End is about, this is what Pleasant Avenue is about, it's probably wrong, because the block group data doesn't incorporate that, and the census people warn you up and down, not to try to mix the data, because it's not mixable.
And
So rather than try to say we took a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then tried to apply some statistics to it, I would say pull it out, go with what you know for a fact, or that you can document, say, this is my source, it's ACS 2023. It's the 2020 census that we pulled it from this table. If you cannot do that, it should not be in our document. We did that for the housing plan. Janice said, this is where I'm getting the information. It's from this table, for this year, for this document. And you guys are not doing that, and that's bad. And it's our document, so you guys can give us bad stuff, but we're the ones who are going to publish this and stand behind it. The other thing I would like to say, and maybe I'm just culturally insensitive myself, but there's a category where you took all the different groups in Montclair, the racial groups, and you lump them into a category called people of color. And I think that's culturally insensitive. And I could tell you why it's culturally sensitive if you want me to. But I think what you should do is follow the construction of the documents that your source documents. If the census people, the census data uses that term, I'd be really shocked. Because what you're going to do, the implication is, the township's going to take this and say the people of color are 80% in this block group. And therefore, we should direct more capital to people of color. And if that's our policy, I'm fine with it. Let the counts come out and say, we're going to allocate capital based on race. You want to do that? Knock yourselves out. I'm open to anything, but just tell people you're doing that. If you're going to allocate programming and things based on race, then you're going to have to defend that. And I think you should pull back and go by and say, look, I get low income, they get screwed. We overdevelop, they get no stormwater. You want to pull something specific, but I think you have to be very careful in what you're going to use to justify your recommendations of the plan, that we spend, we prioritize, we direct effort based on race. It's a slippery slope. The impervious, I totally agree with you. I mean, it makes no sense. We're going to subdivide, we're going to develop, we're going to have more density. By our own laws, we're going to create more impervious by definition. That's the way we're set up to do it. If you take a 40,000 square foot lot and you divide it into 8 5,000 square lots, one has a 55% impervious rate versus the one before it that had 35. So now you get to build that much more and you end up with that much more impervious legally by density. Okay? The other thing you do, and I have to admit, I'm not a big fan of the term smart growth. I think it's a stupid term. But the original concept in smart growth was we were going to have dense, compact development so that we could create open space or maintain open space. We are going to create dense, compact development, but we have no mechanism to say, in proportion, we're going to create this amount of open space or recreational space. And then we come back and say, no, we're going to create recreational space. Okay? And you know what we're going to cover it with? You got it. Asphalt, synthetic turf, because it's going to be high use in dense, compact areas. It's going to be high use by definition. So you're going to have to put synthetic surfaces down. Okay, so as far as sustainability, you're screwed. You're not going to get sustainability in Upper Montclair. You're not going to get sustainability in the OR3, OR4, and all the zones that you want more impervious standards for. Our land use plan says, no, we're going to develop the crap out of them. We're going to make them 3, 4, 5, 6 stories. We're not going to put more impervious in a recommendation. So there's a misalignment between what we're talking about and what we're walking about. And that's my issue with this plan. It's like everything's in there. The wellhead protection ordinance. Okay, fine. It's all the same aquifer underneath, and that's why the Nisqually well is already contaminated, because it's taking water from the same aquifer. So to put a half-inch time of travel little circle around Essex or Nisqually, it doesn't really make a difference. Okay, it took 5 years to get polluted, but it's already polluted. So what are we going to do? Not develop Immaculate Conception because it's in the Nisqually well, or are we going to mitigate it? The worst thing is it's an orphan phrase. There's nothing in the document that deals with a water supply. Okay? It's not like, hey, this is the aquifer. We have 4 wells going out of the same aquifer. This is our situation, and we need to change the carbon every 3 years because of PFAS, and we have to spend $3 million on the Essex well for all the other contaminants. None of that is in sustainability. None of that. None of it's in resiliency. But somehow we have this orphan phrase, recommendation, say, let's put a wellhead protection in so we'll feel better. And where's the wellhead? Lorraine. Okay, what are we going to do? What is it going to protect from? We're already developing, we want to develop the crap out of Upper Montclair. We're not protecting it. It's already polluted as it is. We have test wells all through Upper Montclair. So if we're Nisqually, we're going to put a wellhead protection area around Nisqually. Okay, so maybe that's a good idea. But does that mean you can't put down synthetic turf in 10 years on Nisqually Field when you have too many people using it, or the new playground that's going to take up a half an acre because it's in a wellhead protected area? Or are we going to get that in first, then wellhead protected? So I think this is a good document. Don't get me wrong. It is too big, too cumbersome. But I think we need to challenge ourselves and really take our time, and maybe this takes 2 or 3 iterations to get through. It doesn't help that the government's closed and most of the websites are not updating their data, and you can't really get into the U.S. government databases. So we shouldn't do anything during the closure. I mean, I don't think it's going to happen anyway. But I have more on the list, but I've taken enough of your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I could respond very briefly over the census blocks and the clarifications. We had a
If you feel you need to.
Well, I'm sorry, okay, and this is just DEP's definitions. We deal with socially vulnerable populations and overburdened communities. They're much broader and look at different things and even more things. English as a second language, single-parent households. We are looking at that, and part of this, I guess, evolves from the process of recognizing that we have had to do better. We need to do better. So recognizing those groups that are impacted, and I hate to say I'm hitting the vulnerable population of age as well as that. So DEP's definition is much broader. Janice was very concerned about this, and we talked to Janice because she knows the community. She's worked here for how long? She's done a great job as a municipal planner. For her to be there that long, I applaud her. My hat is off because she is very sensitive to what happens in this community. So we did have a lot of discussion with that, and part of the challenge we have here is DEP just has a bigger, broader definition. We have to address that as part of the grant. It's not meant to devolve funding, et cetera. It's not meant to identify that. It just recognizes that DEP has a bigger picture and a bigger definition for that. And I would also like to add about the water quality. Nick and I did have a conversation about that, or I should say the water supply, because the reservoirs are out of the municipality. It's beyond the scope of us and this scope of work to deal with that. This could be one of your recommendation or resilience action items if you want to look at that, but because it's not directly in the township itself, we can't delve that far into it as part of the scope of work. Nick and I had a very nice long conversation this past Monday about everything, getting ready for the presentation. We heard, we were concerned, we were receiving comments, and we did want to respond to them. So I don't know if Nick wants to add anything else, but I'll stop talking.
That covers it. Yeah. Thank you, Barbara.
I do think it might be good if this is based more on DEP's vulnerable populations to write about that? Because I read mostly EJ's screen, and that was consistent with the earlier draft.
No, and that's, we were looking at both. We wanted to cast, like, we just wanted a way to identify potential socially vulnerable communities. And so, you know, there are these different screens available, pardon the term, but, you know, DEP had one, EPA had one, and it was a way for us just to at least look at things on, you know, a block group by block group level and identify, you know, which areas might be socially vulnerable communities. And so we wanted to use the different measurements as a way to cast a wide net.
And maybe that's just not clear in the document. I mean, I think it's, you touch on them a little bit, but my takeaway from this is it's mostly EJ screen, which, you know, as Mr. Rybacki rightfully said, is no longer available. And this document also acknowledges as well. So, you know, if there are other primary sources of information, I think it'd be good for us to acknowledge it and write about that.
It is footnoted in there. We can also add in different additional reference, but we do note that the heat island / overburden communities analysis map from New Jersey Hazard Adapt, that was one of the things that we also used to identify, you know, areas that might be at risk.
Counselor.
Yeah, I think that something Ms. Grossman, first of all, thank you guys. Thank you so much for taking it, and everybody for having a really spirited discussion. Maybe lost in the weeds of the turf discussion was something that came before that, which was what Ms. Grossman said about the accelerating loss of tree canopy, which is now becoming more visible and may have not been captured in the work that you did, because we have a hard number in your recommendations, number 7, to increase net tree canopy coverage by 10% by 2040. But if the data that you were working with has been, if this is a rapidly moving target right now, that 10% number, I would assume, may be obsolete already.
Or it might be larger if it's based on the older data. That
it would be larger, exactly. It should be larger. And I was just struck by this number anyway, even before that, because it seemed to me to be a low ball. Given basically, it would be a question would be, how impactful is it overall to just talk about the canopy and increasing the canopy? And this feeds into sort of my biggest question, and I'll probably be done with this, which is that you have 58 recommendations, and are they in any way rank ordered in this list? And if you are making recommendations to us, those are priorities that you're saying we should have, but I'm curious as to why, to what extent you could go further and then rank order and prioritize the priorities.
And I think,
but first answer the tree one.
Yeah. So okay. So if I understand that correctly, again, the tree data, where we could update our data based on new information that had come in, we did. We had searched for an updated tree canopy, data, could not find it. So we chose to use this one. That recommendation was one that came from, I believe, the 2023 CCR-HVA, and we saw no reason to get rid of it. I think it was a good recommendation and certainly deserved to remain in that document. Was there another part to that question? I'm sorry.
Yes. How can you? Do we prioritize?
Yes, the
that list of
prioritization.
Priorities.
Correct. And that actually goes right into the Resilience Action Plan. So in this document, they're not prioritized. It's based on what we've seen, these are the recommendations we have. The next step would be the development of the Resilience Action Plan, and where we will work with the township to identify, and to prioritize different recommendations from those lists.
Correct, and we can also decide that prioritization. There's obviously a benefit to the engineering firm having the expertise to tell us what's going to be most impactful.
And we want that feedback.
Right?
Absolutely.
But we also can say, like, this one's the most important for us, right? Like, I think quite reasonably, like, cleaning out our storm sewers is one that I think everyone on this board would say is really high up there. And so, like, we can decide that too. I think the input on what's most impactful per dollar, per whatever is helpful, but we should also have our role. I had a question kind of connected, I think maybe for Norberto, maybe for Janice, maybe for you, around the utility stuff and electrification. One of the big recommendations was to move stuff underground. PSE&G doesn't generally just do that when you ask them nicely. What tools do we have, or any way we can kind of put more muscle behind that recommendation? Is there anything? Because that's just out of our hands. They run the grid.
Well, when new development occurs, it goes underground.
Okay.
And we have control over that.
Yeah, I would agree with Janice. I mean, outside of that, it is difficult, to put it lightly, to get PSC&G to move on things that aren't really moving on their own.
Yeah.
Just relying on them to do things, it's
Right.
it's a painful process.
Okay.
And I'll just echo Janice, like, in my experience in all the communities in which I'm, board planner or township planner, it's redevelopment or new development where the township has a bit of a say, where you can talk with the utility and say, like, we want this underground, work with the developer to do that. So, yeah, new development.
Okay. Thank you.
Just a quick suggestion, in Appendix B, you've got lots of maps back there. If you could make them consistent, it would be helpful to understand them. So, for example, the very first one is a floodplain, and then the next one shows a floodplain, then it says legend businesses. But then there's, dental, doctor, gas station. School is listed as a business. Is that a private school? Because what I did was, I said, where's the green dot, where's Montclair High, where's Buzz, and where's Bradford? And I didn't see the dots on the map. So those are businesses, and then the next one just says legend, but it doesn't describe what, I think they're just districts, the historical districts maybe, but there should be a label there that says these are historical districts. The next one says legend, critical facilities and infrastructure, so that's understandable. And then land use. So
No, that's a great
I think
point.
the idea is just the maps are really good, but if you could maybe just spend some time in looking at how they're labeled. that'd be
Absolutely.
great.
Certainly can do that.
Yeah, I think along with that, there's a couple other detailed ones. I'm following along on the business thing on page 31 of the table, because I think that either comes from the map or the map comes from this, but, when we look at pharmacies, CVS on Valley Road, I don't think is listed here. And that's because I don't think Montclair Pharmacy RX LLC is the same as CVS.
So wait, which page are you talking about? Sorry.
I'm on PDF 35, text 31, page 31.
Yeah, so again, we used third-party data that pulled business data. It's
Understandable.
imperfect. Yeah.
But that's why
Yeah.
that's why I feel like we should be providing that input
Yeah, no,
to
I
you, 'cause
appreciate
we're the
that.
folks that live here, right?
So
And
what was that, the CVS?
CVS Pharmacy on Valley. And similarly with grocery, I think there's some, you could say, okay, we're going to stick with some of the larger grocers. But there's also, Valley Mart. I don't know if I would put in dry goods refillery as necessarily a grocery. It does serve that kind of purpose, but when I think of a grocery store where a lot of people, get their groceries, get the things that they need, especially in an emergency, I'm thinking about the larger grocery stores, the Acme's, Valley Mart, which was the old Quick Check, right? And King's is on here, and I think about, is Campy's Corner still around? I mean, is that something that people still go to? RJ Deli and Grill.
Yeah. So this is a great question, and actually, I think I saw this comment come in, and we looked into this, and we had a very long conversation about it because we were trying to see where you draw that line, because is something where it's your basic like convenience store versus like a grocery store.
Right.
And I think we were moving more towards the grocery store versus, you might be able to get some processed food, a newspaper, and some cigarettes versus, this is where you're going to go for, all of your staples.
But I think there's some areas of town where that is the place that people buy their groceries.
Okay.
It are the smaller, if we're in the city, I'd call them like a bodega type of place,
Yes.
right? Where they do have your toilet paper and your, some fresh foods.
Okay.
But they aren't the grocery stores. And part of that, I say that in part because the south end of town doesn't have grocery stores, right? It's something we've been talking about on this board for the last, 10 years, I think, the food deserts in town.
Yeah.
Right, and so the south end, the east end as well on Bloomfield, right, and you're not privy to all of this stuff, but that's the Lackawanna Plaza area. We've had a lot of conversations about the lack of food in that area. And so being sensitive to that and not wanting to put just the larger grocery stores, if we're gonna, I think we should acknowledge kind of both of them, but I appreciate your sensitivity trying to draw a line somewhere, because we can't have all the mom and pop type stores, but we should at least have some in here and acknowledge maybe the list is incomplete.
Certainly, yeah, and we can have like some sort of footnote to that. But if there are certain ones that should be added, if you could send those to me, we can add those to the inventory. Sure. Unless we want to go through them now.
I don't think my sense is that we're going to need another round of revisions on this based on what I'm hearing. So I would say that's something that we could send to you and then and come back again. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that, but that's my general sense at this point. I still want to hear the rest of the public comment because I think there's going to be a lot of good suggestions that come to the public for something in the future. With that, let's have the next person from the public.
Hi, my name is Carl Nagy, and I live on Buckingham Road in Montclair. I really appreciate all the work you've done, and I'm myself an environmentalist, and I think that, I hope to live in town the next 50 years of my life, and we're going to be needing to adapt, do the right green stuff, and live with climate change, and it's going to be really bad. And hopefully we can do all this stuff without breaking the bank in smart ways that spend money the right way, so we're not spending too much later. And one thing that I would really hope we could take into account as we incorporate any of these recommendations or decide on the recommendations in the town code is that I think, in my opinion, this town is facing a housing crisis, and we have an affordability crisis. A lot of people can't afford to live here. A lot of people who do live here can't afford rent or to own. And one important thing we can do is build more housing, more affordable housing, different kinds of housing. And from an environmental perspective, flooding, sprawl, and and heat sinks, development can be really beneficial to our town in that way. And I would want to make sure that any of the ordinances that we incorporate don't create footfaults, that when we try to do the right thing and build developments, that they now need extra variances because of trees or because of certain things. Like we may have a development
I don't know why
that,
there's flies in here, but like everybody's been doing that.
No. we may have a development that adds 6 units somewhere, and maybe there was a couple trees, but if we didn't build that, maybe there's like a huge swath of Parsippany that has like a part of a forest cut down. Like it might not be in Montclair, but it is also affecting how many trees we cut down and climate change overall and sprawl, because when we don't do it here, we do it way further out. And from our town's perspective, I think a lot of the ways that we do build are really beneficial to the water mitigation. And I'm really concerned about flooding. But if you build an ADU in the back of your house, my understanding is you need to have a civil engineer verify that there's soil testing, there's topographical surveying, and Neglia engineering with our town verifies that everything is, you're not making it worse than you began. Often you're making it better. We're going to build a deck on the back of our house, and there's some issues that we're going to now address in conjunction with doing it all. So we're creating a better environment. I'm not adding a housing unit, but it's possible to do all of that. And when I look at the heat island map that you guys created, which I hadn't actually seen that before. It's somewhat a map of huge parking lots in town. And Lackawanna Plaza is a huge one. And when I looked at the redevelopment plans, there was green spaces, and I'm sure there was, at the roof, if it's solar, it's reflecting sun versus it just getting absorbed into the whole place. So there's lots of like really helpful ways that all of this can be done that is like the new development can be sharing the burden of the infrastructure that I hope we can like factor in and just make sure that that is not prohibited or made harder in any way through all this. And one last thing that I would, I think you guys brought it up a little bit, but maybe worth a conversation is the parking situation in town. And is it at all worth adding a recommendation of reducing the amount of asphalt in town through various means? Bioswale can cut sections out. If I go down Park Street in North Montclair, it's like huge. No one parks there. It's so wide. We could put bioswales in, and instead that water's not going straight to the storm system. Or, one thing for, anytime someone wants to build, there are huge parking minimums. And so we end up creating parking lots as, in conjunction with anything we're doing, which maybe that wasn't necessary, or that could have been reduced, or we could share, underutilized spaces. So I would just hope that we could make sure we factor in things that are going to be like sharing the infrastructure burden, making our town improved, and doing things a smart way. That's all I have to say.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Hi, I wasn't quite sure how to start this, and the gentleman that just spoke before me just said the phrase about, can you hear me?
Yes.
About sharing, thank you.
Can we at least get your
My
name?
name is Lynn Stockhammer, and I live in Montclair, in the 3rd Ward. The gentleman who just said about sharing the infrastructure burden, perhaps you can clarify for me, but I think towards the beginning of your presentation, I seem to be having some cognitive dissonance, and I don't know if I was hearing you correctly, but it sounded to me as if you were saying that where we are already dense, that you're recommending keeping it that way and adding on to that density. Am I hearing that? Because that doesn't seem to go along with the department's goals and hopefully our town's goals in terms of environmental racism, in terms of anti-environmental racism, in terms of keeping things equitable. And it sounds to me as if you're saying in denser areas to put more.
Yeah, turn the button on. Yeah. No, now it's on.
In the denser areas, are you saying that's where we should put more and to leave the 1st Ward alone and not destroy the pristineness? Is that to keep open space? Or where's the balance you're talking about? It seems like it's a burden, not a balance.
We are not, again, as the CCRHVA, it is a component that then informs development of the land use plan element. And so further refining it to show, well, this is where we want to see new growth, this is where we don't want to see growth, that comes from the land use element.
Well, you're talking about, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Are you talking about that you don't want to see new growth where there's already less growth?
Exactly. You don't want to say like, hey, where there's all this tree cover, let's clear that and build something, like build more. Let's build where the infrastructure and the built environment already exists. And as to the point that was made prior, when you are redeveloping a site, you're now all of a sudden having to meet modern requirements, which may include like green stormwater infrastructure. And so it is improving upon what is already there, but at least you're building in an area that has already been developed.
Some might use the word developed and some might use the word, I don't really even have an appropriate word, but where we're already crammed in and you're talking about areas where there's already been people pushed out and overdevelopment that's near that infrastructure that you're talking about, it seems to me that you're just cramming more in.
I think that's one of the nuanced issues that we need to deal with in this next revision, because
perhaps you could frame it better. I think you're probably getting what I'm saying.
I think you're right, and that's
I appreciate that.
we had talked a little earlier about what the housing element talks about, and some of the discussions we've had about the reexamination report of this land use and circulation element about where do we want to put new development in town. And I don't think that's a question that we've answered yet. but I think it's one that we need to be sensitive to and write very specifically about it, so there aren't any interpretations that we as a planning board at least, or we as a community are saying this is where density should be.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think we've got a line of folks over on this side that are lined up and ready to go, I believe. Are there other folks that want to make a comment? If not, okay, if you want Mr. Corfich to come up, then.
I didn't want to jump. I apologize, I arrived late, so I...
Well, I saw people move over there when we asked people for the public, so I didn't know if there was kind of a de facto line.
I didn't want to jump in, I apologize, so I hope I didn't interrupt. I apologize, I arrived, well, first I'll identify myself, David Corfich. I live on Tuxedo Road. I arrived late because I had prior commitments, so I hope I'm not repeating stuff that was said earlier. And a lot of you know my interest in climate stuff for long standing, so I'm going to mention a couple small things and a couple big things. One, I'd just like to repeat the stuff on bioswales and green infrastructure I think is actually really helpful, and I wish there were actually more of that in there. I was just looking at it, and it's kind of mentioned, but I feel like it doesn't get as much attention as it might. I've seen some really interesting examples, and I've read the document. I have not read it in great detail. I did not pore over it for hours, but I just feel like maybe that could be a higher priority. And another thing I'll mention is EV chargers are mentioned, including public chargers, which are helpful, but a large percentage of our town is renters. And renters can't generally install chargers for electric vehicles. And it's not necessarily convenient to use a public charger. The most convenient way is you plug your car in overnight, or at work. That's the alternative. You plug in, you drive home, and you plug it in at work. It's like your cell phone, right? You go home, you plug in your cell phone. You go home, you plug in your car. So I'm not sure there's anything the township can do, but to encourage or require owners of apartments to make EV charging accessible to members of apartments. I think that's something I'm not sure if it's appropriate in here, but if you're going to have EV chargers, if you want people around town to use EVs, and given that a large percentage of the population is actually renters, if you want to make them widely available, you have to make it so that apartment dwellers can use it too. I'm not sure how to do that, but I just wanted to mention that.
So I can jump right in here. And the reason that probably doesn't get nearly as much airplay in this document is because the state now requires multifamily developments to install EV charging as a requirement of site plan approval. And it must, unlike commercial development where it just must be made ready, which you put some conduit in and maybe they'll put something in. For residential development, they have to put in a certain number within a certain number of years, and then a certain number of years after that, and a certain number after that. And so there is now a state requirement that requires for multifamily to install EV charging.
So a follow-up question, you may be able to answer that. Is that for new development only, or for all multifamily?
Yeah, I mean, that is a good point. And yes, it would be for anything seeking site plan approval. So anything that's existing, it's a little bit more difficult. And also, unfortunately, the state requirements for EV charging, you can't require, unless it fits one of the things, you can't create an EV charging ordinance that is stricter than the state requirement, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I remember that Montclair passed an ordinance which was then supervened by the state ordinance, which, to be honest, I think was actually pretty similar. But yeah, the clear issue is that Montclair's already filled with apartment buildings, right? And so that ordinance doesn't do anything for anyone living in those apartment buildings. And again, that may be legal. There's nothing. It may be that Montclair has to get together with other towns that also have a lot of apartments and lobby the state first, allow them to do something. So there may be nothing to be done, but I want to raise the issue. I've actually had renters say to me when I was, as part of being president of Montclair Climate Action, I'd love to have an EV, but I live in an apartment. What can you do for me? And I'm like, I know. Wish I could do something. So I just want to mention that there. So the broad issues I'll mention. I mean, I was looking at the recommendations, many recommendations, and this may just be that works out, but there's a heavy emphasis in terms of number of recommendations on resilience and for climate action in particular, and much less on mitigation. And I just want to say my opinion that I hope that the township will not just focus on, it's important to do climate, dealing with flooding and heat. That's going to happen regardless of what we do, so we need to start preparing for it. But I also don't want the township to say, oh, let's just focus on adaptation and we're not going to worry about trying to reduce our emissions at the same time. So, and again, it may be that, I mean, you can walk and chew gum, right? People can do two things at the same time, but given that there's a lot of recommendations on the list that are about adaptation and essentially a lot fewer on mitigation, I just want to make sure that that doesn't, and also like the other ones are probably easier, right? It's probably easier to clear storm drains than it is to like try to adjust the planning so it promotes denser development in a walkable city, right? Or for whatever, just to take an example. So that's a broad philosophical point I'll mention, and I'm not sure there's anything to be done about that, but mostly it's just like, I don't want that to get lost in the focus on the long list of useful things that can be done for adaptation. And this,
maybe I'll just make it a little less philosophical. I mean, the township does have a climate action plan that has some of those things that you're talking about. Maybe the recommendations in the climate action plan should be at least referenced in this document.
I mean, that would be fine. I mean, the climate action plan is referenced in there.
I know, but the specific recommendation, because there's a lot of good recommendations in the climate action plan to be able to maybe carry a couple of them forward, or in the recommendation section to say, other places where the township has recommendations or things that they're pursuing, here's one.
And I certainly would have no objection to doing that, as you might imagine. So, and the other thing I'll mention is in terms of mitigation, reducing emissions, my impression is the township can't change, can't do EV subsidies. It actually can't change building codes. But what it can do is the pattern of development and the transportation network around town. Those are the two most powerful levers the town has, right? And they're alluded to in there, but I would say a couple things. First of all, I know you're the planning board, you're probably familiar with form-based codes. They get mentioned in the planning document, they're mentioned in the climate action plan. They're a way to, as my understanding, I'm hardly a planning expert, so if I'm getting this right, it's a way to increase density and make the town more walkable without actually destroying the character of the town. You design the space of the town so the street doesn't look dramatically different. Like in my neighborhood, 2 streets over, there's some duplexes. You would never know, they just look like normal houses, or no, they look like single family houses is what I should say. So something like that, and maybe throwing in a reference to that, it's mentioned in the climate, it's mentioned multiple times in the master plan, it's mentioned in the climate action plan, so, and you do mention development. It actually comes up in the first point number 1, which is great. But that's something that the planning board or the township, the recommendation that come to the township council, that might actually be a good thing to do. And the second thing I'll mention is transportation. You'll probably not be surprised here. There's some of you, I bike around town regularly. I bike to work. I bike on to the grocery store. There's a lot of bikers in town, even though there's basically no biking infrastructure. And yet it doesn't really appear here, if I'm correct, right? There's a sidewalk on it, which I also support, right? But there's actually a lot of bikers, and I have a feeling that if we built some bike infrastructure, more would come out of the woodwork, because I've had conversations with bikers who say, I wish I could bike, I'm just afraid to bike around town. And that's given that one half of, according to the Climate Action Plan, half of Montclair's greenhouse gas emissions come from transportation. The best way to reduce emissions is to reduce transportation emissions. That comes from making the town walkable and bikeable. And the form-based plan, the form-based codes are part of that. But also that means, probably means like improving sidewalks. That is absolutely correct. And like having bump outs and all the things the town has done. But also means, because you can't walk everywhere, but you can bike a lot more. We're never going to be a town where everyone bikes everywhere, but if we can get a significant or more significant section of people biking around, that would actually be really helpful. And I would actually love to see that more explicitly in here than it actually is. So I guess, and again, also transit is something that's come up. It's alluded to with the green bus shelters, but that's another way to get people out of their cars. And I know the Township Council is talking about that. So, but I'd love to see in terms of, so there's, like I said, the philosophical issue of let's making sure we're not just focused on mitigation. We're also doing, not just adaptation, we're also trying to reduce emissions, right? And the two biggest levers the town has to play are the parent developments that I would mention, the form-based codes, and that would be transportation, and that is promoting biking, walking, and public transit. So I'd love to see more of those more explicitly in there. And also, I mean, put in recommendations from the climate action plan, but to be honest, those are probably the highest recommendations for the climate action plan. So if that's what if you want to include something in the climate action plan, that's what I put them, that they're all listed in the climate action plan. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just make one
Well,
clarification?
actually, I want to hear if there's other people that
Yeah.
want to speak kind of for their first turn. Are there others, anybody else that wants to be heard on this? Ms. Grossman?
Okay, hi. Just one clarification. Anna Grossman, the DP 2023 model ordinance does not do a one-to-one replacement schedule on trees. It increases that replacement based on the diameter at breast height of the trees, as I had suggested. And even if it didn't, I think the point is that, you want to look at increasing tree canopy, and if one oak is taken down, 2.5 dBH sapling is not going to get us out of this. So I would encourage you to be more aggressive with your language when it comes to trees. And my last question, again, is for clarification. In point 9 of page 64, you say, install cooling technologies in already established artificial turf locations. I don't know what you mean.
We've heard that.
Yeah, but then you say, where artificial turf is necessary, consider alternatives, such as recycled plastic, which also does not exist, rather than rubber. We don't use rubber infill here, per the Environmental Commission, but why not say, explore grass? If you're looking at alternatives.
Anybody else want to make a comment on this document? Anything further from the board?
I'd just echo everything Mr. Corfage said.
About biking?
All of the above.
My sense is that we probably need to do a little more, do some revisions to this before it goes into the master plan. That's my sense. I don't know if the board feels differently than me, but I see some head nods, so.
If we're going to do that, I would like to continue the public hearing to a
Yes.
set date.
And I'm totally fine with that. And I think what the process that we should give you, Ms. Talley, any other specific recommendations, such as, the Campy's Corner and things like that. Does this go through you to go to Mr. Dickerson then?
Yeah, give it to
Okay.
me and I will give it to Nick. to
Okay,
incorporate
so
it.
members of the board, please send your recommendations to Ms. Talley for any changes, including some of the things we've heard tonight. And, Mr. Dickerson, think about how long it's going to take you to incorporate the things you've heard here tonight so that we can get a, with appropriate review from DEP. I mean, there's a lot of steps here. So think about how long you think you may need.
Do we need the date right now, I'm assuming?
We need
We
the
do.
date
We
right
do, right?
now.
Okay,
I
so
don't
I guess
wanna have to
tentatively we should put something down, and then if we have to.
Do you want a few minutes to talk?
I would have to look at I'm just thinking. I would.
How about I give you 10 minutes?
Okay.
We'll take a quick 10-minute break. You all can confer on what a date might work, and then we'll come back and
Sounds
announce it
great.
to the public. Great. 10-minute break. Thank you.
I spent my weekend stomping spotted lanternflies.
You gotta approach from the front.
They're slow this time of year. I was able to get a bunch of them, but
She's out in the hallway.
we have trees and
Chit-chatting. Huh?
River
I just
birches,
went
which are
and
beautiful,
talked to
they're
her, but are we back on
we're
yours?
back on, yeah.
Okay, so we're back. Have you all decided on a date at which we should continue this?
Yes, we did. December 15th.
December 15th? Okay.
December 15th.
So December 15th, you'll be back before us for a continued hearing.
That's our goal.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then,
You're not going to renotice this. We're
This
just
will-
going to carry it.
We're going to carry the public hearing to December 15th.
Okay. So no further notice, so
Arthur,
members of the
No.
public.
Your microphone.
Sorry. Always forget to do that. So just so members of the public understand, there will be no further notice of, published notice of this continuation of this hearing. This notice that the board is giving right now is the notice of the next hearing on this on the issue of the sustainability plan. And that date will be December 15?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. And then, real quick, just want, as I had mentioned, the second part would be the Resilience Action Plan. And while we recognize we're going to be making some updates to the CCR-HVA, which will ultimately impact the Resilience Action Plan, we have a set of overall goals and objectives that we wanted to just bring to your attention just to see if we're on the right track. I'm not going to go into the specifics underneath them because obviously we understand from the feedback received today that there will need to be some modifications. But just real quick, I'm just going to skip over some of these items and just focus here on the core resilience goals that we'll be using for the Resilience Action Plan. And if any of these look completely off base, love the informal feedback now. Otherwise, again, this will be coming back before this board at a later date as well.
Well, why don't you just read them quickly?
Sure. So that would be Goal 1, reduce flood risk and improve stormwater management. Goal number 2, address extreme heat and promote public health. Goal number 3, safeguard fiscal health and infrastructure. Goal number 4, advance equity and environmental justice. And goal number 5, strengthen natural systems and ecosystem resilience.
And are you going to share this with us?
The-
Can you send this to
the-
Ms. Talley and the PowerPoints?
Oh, yeah, yep. It's already shared. I know I'm not allowed to use my laptop, so.
Okay,
I-
great. And
I
then
will.
if you can circulate that to the board and perhaps even put it up on the website.
I will.
Okay.
I will. Okay.
So look forward to any feedback that you have on those. But we hope that those will be the overall, overarching guidelines for the Resilience Action Plan.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And even though we won't be posting formal notice of the continuation, it would be helpful if we can get it in the township newsletter, or at least post it to the website, just so folks know
I will.
as it's coming up. So
Yep.
it's not the formal notice to all the neighboring municipalities and the county and things like that, but
Right.
just to get the word out.
Okay, I will.
Okay, next up we have application 2933 15 Willard Place.
Hey, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Alan Tremulak appearing on behalf of 15 Willard Place LLC.
No.
This is a request for board to consider recommending a zone change for property at 15 Willard Place. It's not a formal application, it's not a public hearing, and ultimately, any decision to adopt or amend a zoning ordinance or a zoning map in this case is a decision that can only be made by the township council by ordinance. However, I mean, the procedures, this doesn't come before the board that often, but I think for a number of years, procedure has been to come to this board first, seeking a recommendation to rezone this property, hopefully, if you agree with our analysis and presentation this evening, and then that would go to the town council for their consideration as to whether or not to actually implement a change. So, to provide a little bit of background, my client, Joseph Valenti, who's sitting in the first row here, acquired this property earlier this year. Property actually had been owned by members of his family since about 1949. And again, he acquired the property in the name of this LLC earlier this year. The property is located on the north side of Willard Place, directly behind the large parking lot adjacent to the DeCamp bus terminal on, or former DeCamp bus terminal on Greenwood Avenue. Property has for at least 75 years, we believe, if not longer, contained a commercial building that has been continuously used for commercial uses since it was built. And most recent years, it was used as an automobile repair business. Although this property has, as I just said, historically been used or continuously been used for commercial uses for many years, it's nonetheless zoned R2 in the two-family zone district. We believe the zone designation should actually be C2 zoning, which is the zoning for the DeCamp property and other similar long-existing automobile-related uses in the vicinity of this property, rather than being zoned as a two-family use. We think the zoning should reflect the historic use of the property. And the boundary line currently between the C2 zone and the R2 zone is located between the camp parking lot and our property, and which is on the westerly side. So the boundary line is on the westerly side of our property. All we're seeking to do here simply is to move that zone boundary line 50 feet east, so that it's, rather than being on the west side of our property, it would be on the east side of our property, which would then, allow for our property to continue to be utilized commercially as it has been for many years. So that's essentially what we're seeking, and again, we're hoping that based upon what we present tonight, that the board would agree with our position and hopefully recommend a rezoning for this property. So having given you that background, I'd like to turn things over to our planning consultant, professional planner Stephen Martini from the Nishawane Group to discuss the request, from a planning perspective, and I believe there was a report that's already been provided to the board. And I would just ask Mr. Martini to
Do we need to mark it?
present.
I mean,
It's
this is
not
the.
It's
do-
not a public
If it's not
hearing.
an application, not a public hearing, we don't need to mark.
You
or
don't have to
do we
mark
need to
it.
swear in? No? Okay.
No.
He's happy to
I'm
be
ready.
sworn if you want.
Yeah.
You can swear at the board.
I mean, can
Depending
I-
on what you do.
We may not let you back in if you do that, but.
Well, I guess to make the board feel more comfortable that I am an expert in planning, I'll just
Just to
go
provide
through.
some
Yeah,
background
okay.
and then
And
discuss.
first with how you spell your last name.
Oh, sure. So Stephen Martini, Martini.
Wait, it's not Stephen?
Stephen.
Oh, Stephen.
That's my first name.
Okay.
Yeah,
And-
last name is Martini.
Oh,
Martini.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah. And my professional address is 105 Grove Street, Montclair, New Jersey, right across the street over there. I have 12 years of professional planning experience. I'm a licensed planner in New Jersey since 2016. My license is current and good standing. I also hold a certificate from the American Institute of Certified Planners. I have a bachelor's and a master's degree from the Edward J. Blasting School of Planning and Public Policy from Rutgers University, both in planning. And I am a 7-year resident of the township, and I live pretty close by here, too, on Forest Street. And in preparation for this hearing, I reviewed the zoning ordinance, the unified land use and circulation element of the township master plan. I reviewed the survey of the site, and I visited it multiple times. It's actually on my way to work, so I know exactly where it is and seen it a lot. And I also reviewed the memo prepared by Ms. Talley, the Township Planning Director, dated July 30th this year. So just to give a little bit of background, this is a block 3210, lot 15. It's on the northern side of Willard Place. Has an area of about a little over 4,500 square feet and 50 feet of a width and about a little over 90.10 feet of depth. And as
What was the depth? I missed it.
90.10 per the survey.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. As Mr. Tremblay mentioned, there is a one-story commercial building on the site that's been previously used as an automobile repair shop. Again, it's currently zoned R2, which is the two-family residential zone, and that's shown on map 3, which is on page 2 of the report that my office prepared. We're here to request for the zone change from that R2, again, that's the two-family zone, to the C2 general business and light manufacturing zone. So we're not here for any variances, as we mentioned, not here for any site improvements. There's no changes being proposed to the site. We're just asking for the zone line boundary to be adjusted to include this property. So with all that said, I'll give a landscape of the surrounding land uses to give you more context of what is there and what we're asking for. Yes.
I was just curious as to why he didn't know how to swear it in. We don't have to believe him or what?
He's more than happy to be sworn in. It's just not a formal hearing. That's, I'll leave it up to the board
This
attorney.
wasn't noticed. It's not our normal application.
Ms. Willis, it's not a traditional land development application. We're not trying to get site plan approval. Again, no variances, no improvements proposed. It's just an adjustment to the zone. And that's something that the Township Council, they would actually take, and they would take, per se, your recommendation as the Township Planning Board that you recommend the zone change occur for this property. I hope that provides clarification in any way.
To me, it doesn't speak to the same issue that I was raising.
I will speak to that later,
I don't understand why
though.
he didn't get sworn in, not because of what's going to happen to the application. I just found it interesting. That's all.
May I ask a question before you give some testimony? Why do you want the zone change? It's a pre-existing use that's existed for 45 years. There's no issue with it, but there must be some redevelopment potential that you're considering. So I think that it might be good if you speak to that, because that would allow us to evaluate what the new zoning would allow.
Well, I can answer that because I don't think Mr. Martini can, and my client's here. And he was not sure exactly what he ultimately wants to do with the property. Right now, he's just storing some equipment in the building. And obviously, under the law, he could continue to utilize the property for an automobile repair business, but that doesn't allow for any other commercial uses other than automobile repair or something that might be considered substantially similar. So, but, which is why he's seeking to change the zoning so that he would have other options available, to utilize the property in accordance with the C2 zone, which allows a wide variety of uses, office uses, retail, restaurant. I don't think the site's big enough for something like that, but it just allows for different options going forward.
And residential.
If the zone.
And residential as well.
Residential could, yes.
Yeah, because you can build a two-family house, but maybe the desire would be I'm just, because I just want to look at everything, it goes C2, there's some resi use in that, which is a conditional use, but then it also flips into R4 pretty easily. So I think we should be open with what the possibilities may be, because I think it's our responsibility to evaluate what potential is for that, not just maybe a slight change in use of commercial property.
But I just want to point out that now that we've got the survey, which I distributed to everybody here, this property does not meet the minimum lot size requirements for a use in the C2 zone. So I'm sure you'll address that, but bear that in mind, that this is an undersized lot.
Doesn't that mean
Board
you-
has some familiarity with undersized
I
lots.
was gonna say, so you'd be back here anyways. I mean, you're, no matter what, you're gonna come back.
Well, that's a good point, because, you know, by changing the zoning doesn't mean we just go in and pull building permits for whatever change in use there might be. I think whatever might be done here, if there is a change in use, you know, whatever happens is gonna trigger site plan review, which would ultimately allow this board to consider the application. It would just, you know, eliminate the need to go before the zoning board for a use variance for anything that's approved. It doesn't evade any municipal review. You know, there undoubtedly have to be a planning board review for any change in use there, or anything that goes in there other than, you know, automobile repair.
And that's the alternate, right? If the council doesn't rezone this and you want to put a different use, you'd end up before the zoning board, right?
Right, and then if you wanted to change the use, you know, 10 years later, you'd be back before
You're back before the zoning board.
And, I mean, again, given the historic use of the property, as clearly, just from looking at the picture, you know, it's never been used for residential, it's obviously a commercial use. It's not a preferred use as automobile repair. We really don't have any intention to continue the automobile use, but, you know, we would like the opportunity to perhaps redevelopment for other uses that would be permitted in the C2 zone, which is right next to the property.
Counselor, I think you had
Uh,
do you have a question?
Yeah, for Director Talley. Just as our town's planner and knowing all the little bits of our township, what do you think the odds are that Lot 3, that I believe we visited, we're being asked here if we would extend the zoning of Lot 3, and do you think it's plausible that Lot 3 would similarly be rezoned in the future?
So Lot 3 is the DeCamp bus site.
Exactly.
I think that it's apples and oranges, honestly. That's a
So-
completely different creature than this undersized lot, you know, pre-existing non-conforming use with the undersized lot.
I only say that because when we toured that building and that lot, it was suggested that its use would be changed.
On
By
this
the-
particular lot here?
No,
Or
not this
no-
particular lot, that the.
Oh,
the
wow.
DeCamp.
DeCamp, I mean.
So in other words, would it make sense to change, to say that we're extending the zoning up the street when we may in fact, in a year, be changing the zoning
Right.
next
Well,
to
I
it?
think that's what and I don't want to, my final comment in my report is I think that this should be considered as part of an overall update to the C2 zone. And I challenge you, when you did your analysis, if you looked at how other undersized lots in the C2 zone are being used. I don't know if you took a look at that. I'd be curious. I didn't look at that, but this would be an undersized lot, and I'm not quite sure how other undersized lots are being
I
used.
took a different approach to this, and I'll just make a couple notes.
The mayor had one quick.
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. I apologize.
Let's.
I was waiting for a rationale for what you want to do with the lot, and that's why
I assume they'll get there as part of this explanation. At least I hope so. But
because right now we've got an R2.
Right.
is your microphone on, Ms. Willis? I just want to make sure you're heard.
We have an R2 neighborhood with, it's pretty consistent. There's the interruption of wanting to move the zone up one level, but across the street it's R2, next door it's R2. I'm trying to figure out why it's a non-conforming use right now, but what is the reason that you want to change it? That's what I've been waiting to hear. I mean, why is it, it's non-conforming right now, and it can continue with that non-conforming use. I just want to know what it is that you want to do there. That's what I'm waiting to hear.
And
It seems like we haven't heard that yet.
But we want to redevelop the property into another use, a commercial use, other than automobile repair, which is all that would be permitted now, or two-family residential. That's the only things that could be done now. Client would like to have options to consider other uses that would be permitted in the R2 zone. I know the mayor wants to speak, so.
She wants to speak, and she's also spotting the fly that's here, so I think it's both.
So Attorney Trimilak, please help me understand why this is not considered spot zoning, considering, if I'm understanding correctly, the entrance of this particular building is on Willard, where all the other houses are two-family houses, and we've talked here about the importance of trying to maintain two-family houses because it will give us an opportunity to have more affordable units. And so on just first, without understanding anything further, I'm just trying to figure out, why is that not spot zoning when you're just coming in and taking that one little parcel of land on Willard and saying, now we want to turn this into C2? Because the front's on Willard, that's correct, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But I think it's important to note, just in terms of your comment, Mayor, which is partially true, that you have a block that has a lot of two-family. On this side of Willard Street, and if you can see this very clearly from the first page of Janice's memo, on this side of Willard Street, the entire block is C2 except for these 5 lots here. Now, 2 of these 5 lots have commercial uses on them. One of them is our lot, and then a few doors down is number, is it 9? Willard?
9 Willard, it's
is also
lot
a
12.
commercial use. So on this side of the street, you only have 3 two-family houses, and then the rest of the whole block is commercial use. On the other side of Willard Street, it's solidly residential, although interestingly, with the exception of 2 historically used commercial properties on the corner of Willard and Greenview. They're excluded from a block that's all residential because of the fact that they're also historic automobile uses that continue today. Yet our non-conforming automobile use was lumped into two-family, but these were not. It's just an interesting inconsistency, but the point is, and it's a valid point, I mean, if this whole block was residential, I would agree with that. On our side of the street was residential, I agree.
But is it zone residential?
You only have 3 residential properties on this side of Willard Street. The rest is all surrounded by commercial. Commercial on the corner here, commercial on the corner of Grove and Willard, and then all the camp property.
Yeah,
So-
I get it, but I didn't realize DeCamp, I thought, was on a different street, not Willard, and the property that you talked about on the corner of Grove and Willard, I thought the entrance there was Grove, so I was just off where the entrance, like what the address of those others are, because when I looked at it, I thought it was that this one was Willard and the others were a different street.
Oh, you did my job for me, Mr. Trimilak, so I was going to talk about all of that. But I think what would also help, if you look at page 5 of the report my office prepared, I think this really visually gives you an idea of what's happening here. So you could see lot 3 is the camp bus. And I don't mean to be repetitive from everything we said, but I just want to reiterate this. It borders our property along the western and northern side. Now that is zone C2. Our site, which is contiguous on 2 sides to that, is zoned R2. And then further, as Mr. Tremulak said, there are automobile uses that are existing, although they are fronting along Greenwood Avenue.
Right.
They're within 150 feet of our site, and they're pre-existing automobile that have been there numerous years as well. So we're very close proximity to those, and it would make more sense for this. This is very close to, and by extension of DeCamp would be part of that C2. It's almost like a it's like an aged light industrial automobile cluster that's historically been here for probably over 80 years, for a very long time. So then that's why I'll say it's not spot zoning. We're not it's giving the context of what's there, that it's contiguous on two sides and very close to other uses that are present in the neighborhood. That's why it makes from a planning perspective, it makes sense to rezone this property. Again, if we were further up by a couple, even on let's say the south side of Willard Place, those are well established, mostly two-family dwellings.
Yeah.
As Ms. Willis, you said. So that would not make sense there because the context is totally different. This side of Willard Place, on the northern side, again, as Mr. Tremulak said, Lot 12, I believe it's 9 Willard Place, that is an industrial use as well. And I believe that's on page...
It's a non-conforming.
Page 9, it's also non-conforming,
And
that's
five
correct.
has a good picture.
On page 9 of the report my office prepared. So again, there's like this hodgepodge on the northern side, just again. But given that we're very close to, we're contiguous with to camp, which is a C2, it makes sense for this. And again, that's one thing, a couple other things I'll really point very quickly. If we were now, let's say the automobile use that's existing there, let's say it reopens with another automobile use, that would have to go to zoning board, if I'm not mistaken, because it's not permitted in the R2. By having this change happen to C2, and if there was going to be a new automobile use at the same site, that would go to this board. So it's also that to consider as well. I believe that's all the points I was going to...
I'd like to build on the mayor's point. What are the arguments about this not being spot zoning?
I thought I made those points by giving the context of where it is, and that it's on the border of a C2. It's not that we're taking a property that's on the southern side that's halfway through the block that we're saying make this C2 instead. We're moving the zoning boundary line 50 feet, and it's contiguous on two sides, not even just one side, on two sides of the property. And I'll note this too, that the camp bus lot, you can see it's an irregular shaped lot that goes all the way to the railroad. So those rear of all those properties are contiguous in the C2. It's all in the C2. So that's as much as I'll say that given that characteristics, it would make sense to rezone it as C2. And again, there's not a residential use on this property. So it would bring it closer to conformance because historically there's been automobile use, as you can see on the first page of my report. That's the existing building there now. So it's trying to bring that further into conformance because otherwise it's a pre-existing non-conforming.
It also makes sense because I think under general zoning law, zoning for properties are supposed to reflect, the historical pattern or historical uses of the property in some respect. And, we're simply saying this property has been historically used for commercials, never been used residential, yet it's zoned R2. Why isn't this property treated the same way as Gainer's Transmission and Hoffman's Auto Body right across the street, where, again, historical automobile-related uses, and they're on a block that's entirely R2 zoning, yet they were separated out from the R2 zoning. Why aren't they designated R2? And they're allowed to not only continue to be used for their current use, but also any other use permitted in the C2. We're just asking for the same benefits, really, that go with the C2 zoning.
And I appreciate that, and I thank you for explaining it the way you did with the two sides contiguous with the property. Again, my concern is that that's not the same street. And so if you look at the stretch, and your map number 5 is an excellent example of my point, where you see how the streetscape is all two-family houses, very nice two-family houses. People have put, resources into their houses to bring, to upgrade the houses and make sure that street maintains two-family. Maybe they were thinking about our need for maintaining two-family houses for affordability, and they have that whole street. Now, if you finish that one lot off with a nice two-family house, boom, it'll look wonderful.
Understood.
Is there any history of contamination on this site? But it was used for...
Used as auto repair. I mean, did you go through the ISRO process?
Yep, no further action.
No further action? Okay.
Okay, good.
May I speak?
Sure.
Mike,
Come on, Joe, just introduce yourself.
My name is Joe Valente.
Microphone.
Yeah. You can either be at the lectern, you can sit,
Hello.
or there's a
Good evening,
handheld
Mayor,
mic, your
Board.
choice.
My
And
name
Joe,
is-
you're the owner of the property?
I am the owner of the property.
Okay, so go ahead.
I'm also the owner of J. Valenti Plumbing and Heating. I own my own plumbing business. I plan on using the property for primarily just to store some equipment in the garage. I have excavators, skid steers, salt. I own several properties in Montclair. 658 Valley Road is one of our apartment complex. 192, 184 Bloomfield Avenue is mine. And I maintain my properties. And I just store equipment and some things I need for the property. That's what I use it for. And that's the reason why I want to convert it from a residential. If I go in there at night, I might be a snowstorm. If I go, open up the doors, garage door, I didn't want anybody, and the neighbors being upset at me for being there at crazy hours, which when it snows and things like that. I'll get the equipment out, and I have trailers, and that's the reason I would like to have it rezoned. I think that's what the guys were all asking. I don't know what I'm gonna do with the property, I'll be honest with you, at a long term, but right now, I just store my equipment and use it to keep some of my material in there.
But you just made a great argument for why we wouldn't want to turn this into a commercial. If you're going to be going in and out at night making noise and disturbing the neighbors, that was an excellent point about why we should consider the neighbors and keep this residential, so we don't have the going in and out and disturbing the neighbors at night.
You're absolutely right, but at the same fair token to me, my grandfather's owned it since 1949, and it's been a commercial lot since he started it, and he put the garage himself up. And then all of a sudden, when I took it over from my mother, I look at it and I said, residential? Why is it residential? It's been always a construction. It was always been an auto repair place. Then I took it, I said, why do I have to? I feel bad even going in it now, but it's not. It was zoned commercial back then, and somewhere between then and now, it was converted, right? I mean, I don't know how it happened, but it was spot zoned back then, right?
Well, I have to say, going through the records, this property has never received any kind of site plan approval from any board in the township. So I don't know the history of how it was built, but we don't have any records of how.
You have a building card saying that my grandfather took a building permit in 1949, that he put the garage up. That's all I know. And that's upstairs. That's where I got it from.
Mr. Neiman.
So I think I'm generally fine with a commercial use, commercial zone, because it reflects the current use. I think it kind of goes to the quirks of zoning, right? Like, it's probably a residential R2 zone because your grandfather had a meeting the night that the planning board meeting discussing the zoning was happening. Like, it didn't matter. He was going to be able to keep using it as he was.
That's right.
And so it's just one of those quirks. I also am waiting for a memo from the Historical Preservation Committee on the historic automobile service sector of town. Because it seems that that's come up a number of times tonight. But yeah, I think something also to think about is, like, I wouldn't be shocked if this changing zone meant that it was incorporated into the Tech Camp bus lot, into a larger lot, because then you wouldn't have the lot minimums to deal with, and it'd be a lot easier to not have to rezone the property to then incorporate it. And so that doesn't sway me either way. It just feels like a long term, it would make a lot of sense if this became part of the larger parcel.
Does anybody know what's going to happen with that camp bus line building?
We do not. They're marketing it.
And so, yeah, that to me seems like the most likely outcome. Do with that what you will.
The sales agent for that building did say that they had ideas for what was the best use, which was like long-term care or something like that.
Assisted living.
So residential. And I like the idea of people getting to do what they want to do. But for me, the common sense thing that just, clangs a little bit is that I do feel like I'm being asked to rezone something from residential to commercial so that it may ultimately end up being used. Now, I'm not accusing you of doing this, but I'm saying I'm going to make it go from residential to commercial, and it will end up being residential as a result of that. And that just seems weird to me. And I live in a state I know where you park in a driveway and drive in a parkway, but it's still weird. It feels weird to do this flip-flop in order.
But if you did go back to residential, like you mentioned before, it's an undersized lot.
No, not for the residential.
It's for commercial.
It's
undersized for commercial.
That's
The point is, it would allow you to build up.
I would understand your
It
concern.
would allow you to build up.
So,
And it might be that a
Which-
nice two-family home will be just having as a storage thing in a two-family neighborhood, especially since two-family neighborhoods are a very helpful thing to people who are looking for affordability. And that neighborhood will be disturbed to have one less home. The person at that last home was now next to a business, and they never were going to have to, it just moves the line another step further in a neighborhood that is very nicely residential primarily.
But if following through on that, as well as if a two-family is built there and you've got this large commercial site next to it, that could, you're gonna have a new
Well, see, well, that's
two-family
what I'm
that's
saying.
gonna
What
be
you're doing is
bordering
moving the
on.
buffer one house nearer. And I don't see really, so far, I haven't heard a good rationale for replacing a two-family neighborhood with one more commercial, that I can't see that's all that compatible with the spirit of a two-family neighborhood.
Mr. Valente, is your property, is the grade below the grade of the grade of your property below the grade of the DeCamp bus site? I'm looking at page 4 of the memo that my office prepared, figure 5. You see the wall on the side and the wall.
yes, it slopes down. Where is that what you're asking?
Well, there's a wall
There's a wall,
between.
that's the decamp bus side on the left.
Is the grade of the DeCamp bus above the grade of your property?
No, it's below. This is the back of this or the west side. The west side is below.
Your property is below them?
No, I'm above them.
Oh, then what's the purpose of, is that wall just to keep the headlights?
I don't know what the purpose is.
Okay.
It's a little lower, yeah. It's the
Okay.
way it is.
Yeah. I'd also note, I biked by there today, and it's like to say weird is not fair to the residents, but like it's a quirky street, right?
Yeah.
Because you've got just these random automobile service establishments, the historic automobile quarter, just mixed in with residential, and none of it quite feel the commercial use, though as historic as the residential use, is a little unexpected sometimes, but it's been there forever, and so it's just as much part of the tapestry. But I will also note, we've been calling it a two-family neighborhood. It definitely has two-family homes. It also has some single mailboxes on some of those houses, so there's, I think, some one-families in there. More to the vibrancy of two-family homes is containing multiple two-family zones, not just being two-family homes, right? They contain many
Right.
things.
But we do like our two-family. zones.
You won't
And
find
we
a bigger
don't
fan
have
of R2 on the.
And if we're going to
Thanks.
replace them with anything, it should be something which is better.
Yeah, and I think it is important to acknowledge that it's not currently a home, right? And it would have to be redeveloped to be a home.
Oh, I know that, but
Yeah.
now it's a one-story building.
Yeah.
Right? And it's in a two, and that's one question I didn't get an answer to. When you have a two-family zone, then you have setbacks, side yard setbacks, front yard setbacks, and backyard, right? This would change that. How near is that building which is there, the one-story building? How near is that building to the line of that lot?
It's right on the property line, actually.
It's on the front.
Survey indicates that, yeah.
But it was also built as a commercial piece of property. It wasn't built as a R2, right? R2 zone.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's why it was built on the property line, and that's,
May predate zoning.
it predates
That's what
zoning,
I was
19
thinking.
Yeah, there
Could
you go,
be.
1960 something.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Zoning, I think, went 1969.
well,
1949.
Yeah, so
Is that built on the property line on both sides? Is
No.
that-
No,
just
no.
Just on the eastern property line.
So that it's nearest to the two-family home.
yeah.
Yes.
It is.
There now.
I just want to ask a question about pre-existing use. How, and Arthur, you might be able to answer. This is a garage building. How precise is the pre-existing use as far as being grandfathered? I mean, if you put vehicles in this garage and park some vehicles on the lot, that seems like it would be a continuing use. I mean, is it so specific where it says, no, you have to repair cars there? But this is just a garage building.
Based on the report that Mr. Martini's office did, it says, in the C2 zone, light manufacturing, auto body, and automobile repairs are permitted uses.
No, I'm speaking about if, right now, it has a pre-existing non-conforming use right now. As, you know, it's a garage building, and they repaired cars in there. My question is, if this gentleman would park some vehicles, why isn't it a continuation of that non-conforming use? How specific is the fact that there happened to be car repair going on as opposed to just parking vehicles?
Honestly,
So,
that
I mean,
hasn't been an issue. You have not received any citations.
No, I try to lay low and quietly go in and quietly go out. And
Yes.
and I store equipment in there. I have a carpenter does some repairs, sometimes he,
So it's
or it's in the garage.
It's a garage, and he's using it as a garage.
As a garage, right.
Exactly.
Right, so
So-
they don't need to do anything.
So I don't
else to
think
it.
Well-
the
Well,
current
that's
use
hopeful.
to store, to store items inside the garage, I don't think is a problem,
Right.
even if he's not doing any repair. It's a-
But there is the manner of the lot in the rear, and what is that used for?
I have trailers in the garage lot and the cars. Sometimes I have a truck or two I leave there that moves the stuff that's in the garage out.
So, and that was used for, that was like a parking lot.
Yeah, it's like
for-
a parking lot for
For
me.
when it was used to store cars. So-
It seems rather similar to the
Right.
previous use.
So I don't think the use is the issue.
And you have the option, as of right, to build a two-family. There's value there. If you convert it to C2, then you don't meet the lot size requirements, and it's going to be difficult to do a two-family. Yeah, you might be able to do another commercial type use, but that's not a walking street. That's not pedestrian. I mean, pedestrians aren't going to walk by and they'll be on Grove, they'll be on busier streets, they'll be on Walnut, probably not there. I'm just,
I guess the concern is it's pretty unsightly right now. You know, you've got the ugly, the chain link fence, it looks a little bit dilapidated.
But that doesn't have anything to do with
No, I'm
changing the
I'm
zone.
just,
The building could be painted or.
right, that's what
I've changed the doors.
I'm saying it would be, there's nothing precluding you from fixing it up. I just want to point out, it's not a very attractive use right
I
now.
can fix it up, that's not a problem.
But you don't have to change the zoning to fix it up.
No,
Because
no,
you
it's
could
true.
continue
This is
to
true.
operate it.
But just, if I do decide to not use it, I'd have to come back in front of you to change the use on it. If I don't want to make a two-family house. If I don't want to build a two-family house, I'd have to rent it out to someone else, and then I have to switch it to a commercial application, a C4.
Well, it would end up being a use variance application
What is-
before
It'd have
the
to be a
zoning
use
board.
variance.
So you go to the zoning board technically,
zoning
but
board.
Yeah.
What is inside the building? Is there car repair equipment? Is there a lift? Or
No,
is-
nothing. It's just a bathroom, storage room, skid steer, excavator, forklift, everything I need, move salt, and move equipment around.
Okay.
Do you,
I think.
is there more you want to? I guess I'm looking at, sorry, at Mr. Martini. Is there more that you wanted to provide? I mean,
I was just going to make one more
no,
point.
you can stay seated.
I'm sorry, that's why I went over here. I'm looking at page 2 of Ms. Talley's report, and although for the D campus in 1981, there was a use variance granted, I'll point to the last sentence that the zoning for these lots was subsequently changed from R2 to C2. So previously, there was a zone change here for, again, the property that abuts this property in 2 directions. And I'll just make that note that a zone change happened previously to a lot that is contiguous with this. Just something to consider. That's all.
Well, now we know the history.
Thank you.
Reminded me.
I mean, it seems to me that if the council wanted to change this particular property to C2, it should consider doing that whole side of the street for a lot of the reasons that you've outlined tonight. Is that, you know, the reasons you've outlined for this property, you know, but for perhaps the existing commercial use, but that applies to another lot that's also in that stretch of, what did you say, it was 5 lots? Yeah. That's in that section. It almost feels like that whole section should be rezoned to C2 if that would be the will of the council. Otherwise, this does still, to me, feel a little bit like spot zoning when some of those same conditions apply to your neighbors, essentially. So,
I guess one of the concerns is that this is, even though we have a number of non-conforming properties on the north side of Willard Place, these properties all face residential homes on the other side of the street. So I think that's a consideration.
Which gets to my next point, was that I don't know if C2 is the right zone for those 5 lots. You know, if you want something that's kind of lighter commercial, maybe there's a different zone. Maybe it's the neighborhood commercial zone. Maybe it's one of the residential zones that allows some other uses that might be appropriate. Because I have that same feeling. You know, you're up against the R2 across the street. C2 allows for a 4-story building. I recognize that your neighbor is a 3-story building, so 3, 4, maybe it doesn't look that high, but just the characteristics that we generally see in the C2 zone up against the R2, I'm not sure if I personally like that based on what I've seen, and also knowing it's an undersized lot anyway. So even if the council were to rezone this as C2, you'd still end up before us with a new application for whatever development you have. Like, it just doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And without having gone through all the other options in our zoning code, maybe C2 is not quite the right one. And I don't know if Ms. Talley has, you know the zoning code better than I do, if there's a different zone that might be more appropriate.
No, I don't think so. The direction I was going into is perhaps coming up with a special, because we do have other undersized lots in the C2 zone district, and maybe coming up with a specific subcategory in the C2 zone where you have only specific permitted uses on these undersized lots, because you would not want to see them overbuilt.
Right.
So that was just.
I haven't yet heard the rationale for why the change from the R2 zone is a reasonable change if you're going to make it into a place to store stuff or to whatever.
Right.
We have really not that many, and I saw Janice, and I was wondering if you could break it
We
out.
should probably make sure your mic's on,
It's
Ms. Willis.
on, but
Okay,
I
good.
could talk into
or maybe bring it down closer, just so we.
It's on, but I could sort of.
You have a
talk
lot
it.
of good thoughts,
Okay.
and I want to make sure they get on the record.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out, especially since right now, the building which is non-conforming is a 1-story building, which is not all that intrusive, right? But it's a 1-story building that's built right on the property line.
Right.
So that if you make that building into a 3-story building, then it's right on the property line, and it doesn't have the setback right.
You're absolutely right.
So I don't understand, I right now, considering the value of having 2-family neighborhoods, and we don't have that many, and one of the things I wanted to ask you, Janice, is that you have a statistic that says how many 1- and 2-family homes are in a group, but you don't separate them out. But my understanding of, if I know the statistics right, is that most of we have a 1 and 2 family zone with an X number on it, that most of that is one-family homes.
You mean in the two-family zone districts?
No, I'm saying that you have a statistic that says in the town of Montclair, there are 1 and 2 family homes that are this number. But most of those, lumping them together does not really show up the fact that we don't have as many two-family
Well,
homes
that's
as
true.
we even used to have.
And I can separate out those statistics. I can get how
but-
many
but
one families
I
and
think
how
that
many
we need to continue to value the opportunity. We talk about affordability.
Yep.
It's always good to have affordability for people who have no income and must rent. But we also want affordability for people who own their homes.
Right.
And in this case, we have the opportunity to continue having a good two-family neighborhood, which has some intrusions, which this is intrusion, and down the road, there's another intrusion.
Right.
But we would seem better to protect the two-family neighborhood rather than, because someone wants to store something somewhere, give up the two-family neighborhood, move the line, and allow that to become a line where there's, New Jersey says that one of the main things of the law regarding real estate is that they should protect light and air.
And open space.
And what about the light and air for that building? You know, we just went over that, where we had buildings built to the line.
Right.
And there's a wall where if you put a wall in, a window in a building, it's really facing a wall.
Right.
So why would we, in a neighborhood that is a very well-kept, two-family neighborhood, take this one more lot away from it and give it to something which is not yet defined? It doesn't make sense to me. I don't see why we would want to do that.
Unless we create a provision in which this is in the C2 zone, it can be used for storage, you know.
But that makes it a C2 zone.
No. This is just a concept, you know, undersized lots in the C2 zone could be used for uses that do not affect the neighborhood, such as storage, or it can be converted to a 1 or 2 family house, but no more. Because certainly when I look at the list of permitted uses here, retail stores and personal services, that would not be appropriate at this location.
What zone are you looking at there?
I'm looking at, this is page 6 of.
I believe that's C2.
C2.
Yeah, this is the C2 zone.
It's page 6 of your memo,
Mr.
right,
Martini's
Ms. Talley?
report.
Oh, Mr. Martini's report. Okay.
Mr. Martini's report, retail stores and personal
had that
services. You
page.
wouldn't want a retail, this is not an appropriate location for retail. It's not an appropriate location for a restaurant. There may be that's what I was trying to get, there may be a very limited number of uses that would be appropriate at this location, in addition to a two-family house, like you said.
That's if you change what a C2 zone is. But as looking at the list that's there, it's got a lot of things that can be, including
Right.
cannabis, retail, includes just a whole list of things that cannot take place in a R2 zone.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out, I was waiting to hear, I thought tonight was going to be, I want to do X, or I want to do
Right.
Y, or I want to do Z, and then we could look at it. But to just change it at this point and have one less area that's an R2 neighborhood, I haven't heard a rationale for doing that, unless we don't value the R2 neighborhood, so that anything to do.
Was that, if you, did you ask me a question? I didn't, I don't think I heard it. Okay. Was that a?
No, I'm thinking. I'm sorry. I'm staring at you because I didn't know if you were going to say something else. But
No. I just thought I didn't hear correctly.
So I'm not hearing overwhelming support for this. Do we need a formal recommendation? Is this kind of an informal, since it's not a hearing? You've heard our thoughts.
I think usually what happens is the planning board makes a recommendation. Well, yes or no. And I
think the board is not inclined to recommend the rezoning,
Right.
and to me, that's the end of the
Can I make a
conversation
halfway
for now.
recommendation, which is that this very large plot of land, Lot 3, is one of the last big, it's a very big lot of interest to a lot of people. It's going to be in play, and that, if we could just, as I say, put a pin in it, and then when that happens, something is going to happen. And I believe the council will probably be involved in some way, or this board will be involved in that. And so, and that probably will be within a year or half a year. And if you can wait, if that's not undue hardship, it's good to see you, and it's not an unreasonable request. And if we can just wait and see what those two other walls.
Well, there's obviously, I think, going to be a big change there with the camp property.
Okay.
And who knows?
Look at it all together, and it could be really cool.
And I can continue to use it the way I've been using it with
Sure.
no
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
No reason.
existing.
I mean, that's what it sounds like. That's not for us to decide.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're not saying yes, but it sounds like that's what I might have
I got the
heard.
feeling too. I got the feeling no in it too.
Yeah,
We're not going to sick the zoning officer.
yeah. I mean, that question might be for Ms. Talley in her office at this
Yes,
point.
yes, I understand.
Not this board.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you for your
Thank you
time.
very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very
you.
much.
So what would that be?
All right, do we have any committee reports?
No, for those of the zoning committee, those last zoning changes are on the council agenda for tomorrow night that we recommended to the inclusionary zoning ordinance, so we're moving ahead with that.
Do we need to fill committee positions?
Well, we filled some of them.
Okay.
We have Councilor D'Amato on the Development Review Committee, and we have Mayor Baskerville on the Redevelopment Subcommittee. I still need somebody for the Planning Board Revisions Committee and the Bylaws Committee.
Can you explain, please, a little bit about the responsibilities? Please, would you explain the responsibilities for the Board Revisions Committee?
Quite frequently, after the...
Oh, you can stop. You said frequently.
No.
That's all I need to
The
know.
Revisions Committee
Frequently.
never meets in person. What happens are, after the board approves a site plan, the applicant goes and they prepare their construction drawings, and there's a change. Not a change that triggers an amended site plan approval, but a minor change to what was approved. That goes to the Revisions Committee, and we discuss it, and if it's satisfactory to the Revisions Committee, then we sign off on that change to the site plan. That's all. And we usually do those via email.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
So,
If no one else feels strongly about it, I can be on the Revisions Committee. I mean, you've been copying me on those emails the last several weeks, so I feel like I'm de facto there already.
just to let you know what's going on.
I appreciate that. I mean, but if
Mr.
somebody else
Chair.
wants to do it, I will gladly
It's
move off
really
of that.
quite a light lift. Like, I think I've been on it for, 6 months at this point, and I've gotten maybe 2 emails, maybe 3 about it, so it's not a heavy burden for anyone who wants to
So it's not like you're
relieve
coming
Keith.
in here frequently?
No,
Okay.
no.
And then bylaws are only when we decide we want to change bylaws. So there's not much that goes on there.
So, that's for a law and order kind of person.
I happen to enjoy it. That's why I'm on it. And
Is it,
Give us an example.
I worked on bylaws, I think, previously, so do you need someone for that?
I'll put your name down, Tony.
all right, Mr. Ian Wally's in
Thank
for
you.
bylaws, and now we're full.
Thank you.
Okay. That brings us to
Pay the
bills.
bills.
Is there a motion to pay the bills?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
I'm so glad Graham is not there. because
Why? He's usually the one that, you
Well,
know,
he didn't want to
really
pay
gets
you?
after it.
He wanted-
And with that, I would move adjournment.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Abstentions?
Good meeting.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good meeting. Thank you.